Chapter 1254. The Void. For ease of imagination and understanding, it was much easier to imagine the void as an ocean with no shore in sight when it came to understanding the natural movement of all objects in the void. It was a dark, boundless ocean with endless void power surging beneath its surface. Boundless energy, dangerous, incomprehensible, and unfathomable to its limits. The only thing that existed in the void was endless void energy. That was the shallow layer, but whether it was the shallow layer or the deep layer, void energy was like a fundamental element of the world and would definitely exist. Although the deeper one looked, the more things one would discover. The world light was located near the shallowest part of the void, which was equivalent to a person completely diving into the sea. If one dived a little further, they would still be in the shallowest part of the void, and they would be easily affected by mysterious factors from the shallowest and deeper parts. For example, the small waves on the surface of the sea that were blown by the wind, or the undercurrents that surged from the depths of the sea. Their power would cause the world light to slowly drift in the void. For living worlds, the world heart would control its relationship with the void. Worlds that belonged to the upper plane would not drift to the middle plane, and worlds that belonged to the lower plane would not move to the upper plane. This was the result of the world heart's self-control. This slight adjustment was enough to prevent them from drifting along the currents of the void to the upper plane. Of course, humans could change this. For gods, it was not difficult to move a world light from the lower plane to the upper plane. However, for dead worlds, with the world heart destroyed, the world light could no longer maintain itself and hence began to crumble. The world barrier would crumble, and the void would pour in like a waterfall, destroying rules, order, and everything tangible and intangible, reverting to the most fundamental zero where nothing existed. If a world light that had lost its world heart was preserved like a relic due to various special reasons, the world light would drift along the void's currents to any place and never stop. As long as the void did not stop, the world light would never stop drifting along the void's currents. It was also for this reason that in the depths of the void, in the extremely distant depths, some strange objects that belonged to the prehistoric era would occasionally be discovered. There were special objects that had not been disintegrated by the void, such as the Great Void Rift. The first generation Great Deity, the Origin Great Deity, and the others had encountered a great calamity near the 40th era of the 39th era, which was the end of the mythological era. Until now, the Yun-Nuwa planet had yet to investigate the details of that battle. They could not find it. Perhaps he was one of the few living beings in this void who knew about that battle. But if they wanted to know more about it, perhaps they from the underworld would know. That calamity ended with the fall of the Origin great heavenly gods. Their passing destroyed many things. The great primordial realm, the various primordial realms, and the void had both visible and invisible changes as a result. Some of the effects were far-reaching, while others were temporarily unaffected, but they also left behind a piece of evidence that could not be erased by anything. A piece of evidence that proved the collective fall of the Origin great heavenly gods existed in the depths of the void, in the distant depths. The great void fissure was left behind after their fall. In that fissure, there was a never-ending storm of divine destruction. Anyone who touched it would die. No matter who it was, if they touched it, they would die on the spot. It was an unparalleled burial ground. No, it was a dangerous place in the void. Not many people knew about it. And among those not many people, only a handful of people knew about the location of the Great Void Fissure. The supremacy of the Suya world was one of them. Not long ago, he had opened the fissure and at the same time let Yin Nuashing and Hui know where it was. As it was buried in the deep depths of the void, even if one passed by above, they would not be able to see it. It was like walking on the road and never knowing what was happening in the depths of the earth beneath one's feet. It was the same principle. This was also the main reason why not many people knew about the Great Void Fissure. The second reason was that they did not know where it was, and they could not deduce where it might have drifted to by observing the void that was right. The Great Void Fissure was definitely not in the depths of the void. According to the scattered memories that Yin Nuoxing had obtained, the place where the great void fissure had occurred was probably near the realm of the gods, or rather, when it was quite close to the realm of the gods. The huge explosion of energy that formed the great void fissure had spread to the realm of the gods rather quickly. Well, probably quite quickly, according to the memories of the Eye of the Ocean. Probably quite quickly. Well, Yin Nuoxing could not be sure about this. Who knew if that energy had affected any part of the void and infinite speed or something else? Based on the energy form of the heavenly god of origin and the others, that level of energy, he felt that it was very likely that it was synchronized with the entire void. Didn't that mean that he had just said a lot of nonsense? In short, he felt that it should be very close to the realm of the gods. As the guardian of the great Yuan realm and the guardian of the world of order, the first great heavenly god had maintained a level of mystery that everyone knew about but could not see. It was very likely that he existed in the upper plane, or at the very least at the edge of the upper plane. And now, the great void fissure was in the depths of the void very, very far away. This endless distance was the result of drifting slowly in the void over an endless period of time. The great void fissure floated from the center of the void to the endless depths. No one knew, and no one did not know. Suddenly, a ray of light flickered in the void and suddenly expanded. Two figures emerged from it. Upon closer inspection, it was a young girl with a pair of wings supporting a humanoid creature that was dressed in black and had black hair from head to toe. Naturally, it was Yin Nuoxing and the little angel. After not seeing each other for a few hours, Yin Nuoxing did not know where she had gone for another round. Now, her entire body was emitting the word weak. "Are you all right?" The little angel supported Yin Nuoxing as they slowly descended from the void. She looked at the void and let out a long sigh. Then, she said faintly, "You said that the next goal would be to come directly here. But in the end, you forcefully set up 6 time nodes in 3 hours." When she saw that he was so tired that he was about to lose his soul, her frown deepened. "Why do you have to do this? You're asking me." Yin Nuoxing clutched her chest and rolled her eyes. "How would I know what I'm doing?" After taking a deep breath, he slowly stood up. However, he only stood up straight. His pale face told everyone in the void that he was about to reach his limit again. Setting up a time node required a lot of time. Normally, they would only be able to set up less than 3 time nodes in 3 hours. However, he had used his own energy to forcefully catalyze many processes. The results were spectacular, but the price he had to pay was also terrible. The little angel looked at the fearless smile on that white face and suddenly felt that it was not as bad as it imagined. After all, it was this guy's own fault. 3 hours ago, he had said that it was his intuition. Then, he started working like crazy. After working so hard, he finally came to this place. This was the place that he had said that he would come to 3 hours ago. In the end, she did not know what stimulated him. Why did he suddenly go crazy? Yin Nuoxing stood on the spot and rested for a while. When the feeling of nervous exhaustion subsided a little, he slowly took out the cold black metal piece from the pendant. Just as he was about to do something, the little angel held his hand from the side and said, "Wait a minute. Do you know what you're here for?" Yin Nuoxing was stunned. "Aren't you going to open the void rift?" Hearing that, the little angel opened her mouth in shock. "Who told you to open this thing? Did these 3 hours spoil your brain?" In the end, the void rift, the time node. "What are you doing here?" Yin Nuoxing shook his head absent-mindedly. He was a little anxious. He had forgotten his original purpose. That was true. Why did he come to this place? We told him that I Ching's information mentioned the time crystal and the void rift. Perhaps he should take a look at the Sea of Time first? Seeing that he had calmed down, the little angel breathed a sigh of relief. This guy's brain must have been fried from overworking. He wanted to mess around when she was not looking at him for a while. After a while, seeing that he was focused on the void, looking into the depths of the void, as if he saw something, the little angel also focused on that direction. The little angel was not sure if he could see anything in the Sea of Time. The scene in front of his eyes became a little blurry. It was a completely different feeling from when he looked into the Sea of Time. There was a kind of consciousness that was frozen at the same time as time, or falling into chaos. His consciousness was exposed in the chaos of the void land. It was a very strange feeling. He could not explain it in a short time. When his consciousness left the chaos, his vision gradually stabilized. What he saw was 2 layers of dark yellow crystals pressing down on him from above and below. There was an ancient presence that was suffocating. Is this why he specifically mentioned this place? Yin Nuoxing's voice came from the side. He reached out to touch the dark yellow crystal layer, expecting to touch the surface of the water. However, when his hand reached out, he felt a cold and hard touch. The sea of time in front of us has been frozen literally. Such a scene only exists in theory. This is the first time I've seen it. He let his consciousness return to its original position and turned to look at Yin Nuoxing. Just as he was about to ask, he caught a glimpse of it. It was still in the dark yellow space of the sea of time. He was stunned. When did we come in? Just now, during the few seconds when my consciousness was confused, we were probably sucked in. Yin Nuoxing stood on the crystallized sea of time below. He stomped his feet a few times, but it did not move. He raised his head and looked up. There was also a sea of time hanging upside down in the sky. Similarly, it had turned into crystals. This sea of time has encountered an unprecedented disaster. It is more terrible than all the disasters you can imagine combined. It has been frozen. This sea of time, this space, the void, everything here has been frozen on the day the sea of time was fixed. However, it continues to exist eternally and will never be destroyed. Yin Nuoxing turned around and walked quickly into the distance. His trench coat and long hair fluttered in the wind. When the little angel saw him, she quickly followed behind him. The day the sea of time froze, doesn't that mean? Yin Nuoxing raised his head and narrowed his eyes slightly. At the end of the 39th era, which was also the moment when the mythological era ended, there were remnants of chaotic energy everywhere. The chaotic energy was full of destruction. The gentle energy was full of infinite vitality. The power of destruction and rebirth kept turning in this place, but they could not escape from the corner where they were active. Everything here was frozen, everything was fixed. The destructive power of the first generation of the great deity had completely destroyed the void and the sea of time. What was left here was just a crystallized world. There would be no new life, no release. Everything was trapped here and became an eternal reflection. This is the power of the heavenly God of origin, the power of that realm. She looked around. When she heard what Yin Nuoxing said, she only felt fear in her heart when she saw the frozen space. It was as if there was an indestructible soul of the dead lingering in this place, watching the uninvited guests who had barged in. Perhaps this is just the tip of the iceberg. Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh of relief. This is just the great destruction caused by the aftermath of her energy. An even greater amount of energy should have poured out from the center of this space and ended that battle. At the same time, it also caused this unexpected scene. I'm a little worried. Worry? Yin Nuoxing let out a bitter laugh and shook his head. To be honest, when I accidentally fell into this space, I already thought of myself as a dead person. I didn't know when I would meet something and die, and I just ascended in broad daylight for no reason. This is the place where the first generation of great heavenly gods fell. All of the rules, karma, and order have been completely destroyed. All of the rules, karma, and order have been tangled up like hemp rope. I don't even dare to think about what will happen if I casually walk into this space. But now, there's no turning back. The little angel was stunned for a moment. Her floating figure paused for a moment, and she stopped to look at him. From the beginning, she had felt that something was wrong. He seemed to be inexplicably excited, but also seemed to be somewhat afraid. His hands were faintly trembling in his pockets, but she didn't know why they were trembling. She gently floated to his side. When she saw that his cold and hard face was slightly pale, she couldn't help but ask, "Are you afraid? If I say that I'm a little afraid, would you believe me?" Yin Nuoxing grinned and laughed. The little angel nodded her head. Yin Nuoxing laughed silently. He looked at the hand that was held by the little angel and didn't care about anything else. He just walked forward and said softly, "Do you believe in fate?" It did not answer. He had merely asked the question and was not waiting for it to answer. After a while, he muttered to himself, "I'm already a being of this realm, yet I'm still saying those two words. It's a little laughable. In fact, ever since I came here from the future, I've felt that everything I've experienced in this very moment was a replay. Everything that cannot be changed, yet I stubbornly wanted to twist something. I thought I had done it, but it was actually something that was destined to happen. I was destined to do something, destined to do that, destined to come here. When I think about it this way, I feel that I don't have the motivation to do anything. But in reality, if I don't do anything, those destined things might not happen. In order to change the past, in order to make up for this mistake, reality might collapse into an even worse future. Even if this is a dream, even if this is something that happened in the past, I don't want to see the future so chaotic. So I'm doing my best. I don't know why I'm reaping what I sowed. Perhaps the knot in my heart is really affecting me greatly. Even if I know that this is something that can't be avoided in the future, at the very least, I don't want to see that scene here. For that, I'm willing to risk everything." The little angel listened and remained silent. She squeezed his hand and said softly, "Then why are you afraid?" "It's because I know that perhaps I'm destined to come here." "Ha! But this is the place where the power of the origin great deity remains." "Ha! In this life, the place that I don't want to be involved with the most is the realm of the gods. Their power remains, and they trap me for dozens of eras without letting me go. Who knows what I'll run into in this place?" Listening to him, he seemed to have some resentment towards the origin heavenly gods. Perhaps he also felt some resentment towards them. For no reason at all. They had placed this burden on a person who only wanted to live as he pleased every day. This dark age was a small beginning. If it wasn't for this, perhaps the path of the future would be completely different. Quarter Moon wouldn't have come to that step, and she wouldn't have made arrangements that would affect the future of the future. And then, now that he had bumped into this place, the uneasiness and resentment in his heart had all risen to unprecedented heights. God knows what he would do in a while. This crystallized sea of time. Can time nodes still be set? It decided that before he became even more uneasy and irritable, it would be better to change the topic and let him think about something else. Yin Nuashing muttered and shook her head. "I don't know. Crystallization of time, probably named by someone who had seen the situation here. The sea of time here is frozen, and everything is frozen on the day of the disaster. This entire region and the entire void has become like this. When the great void fissure drifts along with the void, it would infect the void and the sea of time passing by, turning them into this sickly state. Once it leaves that region, it would recover after some time. But now, there's probably no time for it to leave, and it has occupied this sea of time. In other words, it's very difficult for me to set up a time node in this frozen sea of time. I can't even find where the hole in the sea of time is. You're asking me what to do." Yin Nuashing revealed a smile that was uglier than crying. "How would I know what to do?" Chapter 1255. Destroyed at the end of the 39th era, that space had suffered the most terrible and unimaginable destruction in this world, becoming an eternal relic that stood in the sea of time and would never wither. That space. Yes, that space. Which space is it? Is it the temple of the gods of origin that appeared on the murals, or a bigger space, or something else? But these were not important. What was important was that now, this eternal relic had become a source of destruction that constantly affected the surrounding space. It was constantly destroying the surrounding space, freezing the sea of time in this void, turning this place into a meaningless crystallized space. It's not working. I can't find a place at all. Is there really no way at all? The little angel sat down dejectedly and turned to look at Yin Nuashing, who had to stop 2 seconds earlier due to exhaustion, and said, "Let's not do it here. Let's go somewhere else. The setting of the time node is not completely limited to only one." Yin Nuashing sighed helplessly. The sea of time in this realm is completely frozen, and all information has been washed clean. Everything is frozen in this golden, crystallized space. Disorder, information disorder, time disorder, I just tried to use my divine power to reverse the distortion of the local area, but it didn't work. He looked up helplessly and covered his eyes with his palm. After all, this is the energy left by the gods of origin. The situation in the Sea of Time is terrible now. Fortunately, it's only this area. I did a little calculation. If this frozen phenomenon occupies 1/10 of the size of the Sea of Time, the space in this realm will become a mess. The little angel gritted its teeth and kept glancing around. They had been wandering in this gorgeous crystallized Sea of Time for 2 hours. They did not know where they were going, did not know if they were going forward or where they were going. They could not go out, nor could they do anything to this place. It was as if they were trapped in a prison. It was said that it had been 2 hours, but its sense of time had gradually become blurry, and it could not clearly perceive what time it was now. It was as if its sense of time had been weakened as the Sea of Time froze. Yin Nuashing looked at the little angel who was so depressed that even its wings drooped down and its beautiful silver hair lost its luster. He shook his head helplessly. They had inexplicably entered this place for some time now. How long? Maybe 2 hours, maybe 5 hours, maybe even their sense of time had become blurry. In fact, it might have been a few years. During this period of time, he did not think of resting or adjusting his body, nor did he feel uneasy. Since they were here, they should just take it as it was. In his long life, he had already adapted to all kinds of bizarre situations. What was more exciting, speaking of which, this might be the most exciting thing he had ever encountered in his life. Just think about it. They were in the frozen Sea of Time. A little bit of the surface was the void, that space full of God's destruction storms. Hey, those who touched it would die. That void, that weak barrier of time, could not withstand the turbulence of the God's destruction storms and was broken. If a little of the storm was swept into the Sea of Time, then they would be buried here, and no one would ever know. Yin Nuashing tapped his temple with his wrist. His soul was silent. Huey's soul seed did not move at all. He could not even sense his situation. Vice versa, it was probably the same. He had mysteriously disappeared, and the soul seed could not sense his situation. He did not know whether he was dead or alive. That guy was probably very anxious now, but there was no way out even if he was anxious. He also wanted to get out of here as soon as possible, solve the mess in front of him as soon as possible, and then find a place to have a good sleep. He did not care about the underworld or the world of order. He did not care about anything. He did not want to care about anything. The weight on his back lightened. The little angel was stunned for a moment. He hurriedly turned his head and saw Yun Nuashing falling to the side with an extremely pale face. He was startled and quickly reached out to support him. Hey, you're still. He was still okay. He was just too weak. The little angel heaved a sigh of relief. However, this situation was not good. He had just gotten out of the weakened state not long ago, and he had spent a lot of effort to set up the time node. Not long after, his body became extremely weak again, and he entered this place. This frozen Sea of Time did not have any trace of energy, and there was no way for him to recover. Furthermore, he used his energy to maintain the barrier, to isolate the chaotic law fragments that filled this place. If it was a normal person, they might be able to hold on, but this guy, don't force yourself if you haven't recovered yet. Really. The little angel let out a long sigh. She bent down and picked him up. I'm not really your baby sister. If there's anything, just tell me. I can support the energy barrier and take over your shift. Ever since he started using this body and this face, he had intentionally or unintentionally treated it as his baby sister. He held it in the palm of his hand and was afraid that she would bump into it. How should he put it? He had spoiled it too much. It should be known that Ming and the others were not vases that needed his protection all the time. Although they enjoyed the process of being protected by him, they would occasionally reveal a little bit of their violent side. Well, it was all because of him. He sighed helplessly. Anyway, he was such a person. He bore the greatest suffering in this world, but he could not bear to see them suffer. Feelings could indeed change a person. However, when it came to him, it changed in an extreme direction. How should he put it? To quote someone, he seemed to have become weak because of this. He did not know who said it, But this sentence had been echoing in his heart. Perhaps he had understood something and knew something in advance. That was why he chose to put the chains on his heart at that time. It was to prevent himself from coming into contact with those overly beautiful things. It would make him weak, It was not that he was worried for nothing. There were many big things that happened when it came to feelings. Oh, I digressed. It carried him and floated in the sea of time, crystals like a ghost. A few hours had passed. It did not know how long it had been. Its sense of time had become completely blurry. There was only the unchanging golden color in its sight. The golden crystals embedded in the sky, and the earth rose and fell like the sea. They were like inverted mountains and peaks. They were gorgeous, dazzling, and confusing. Hey, do something. We've been here for a long time. It looked at the sleeping beauty in its arms, who was wrapped in its wings. It could not help but sigh. If this continued, there would be no end to it. Yin Nuoxing's eyes were tightly shut, as if he was sleeping soundly. His long eyelashes fluttered lightly, as if there was no movement at all. He lowered his head to take a look and helplessly shook his head. He was already very tired. Let him rest for a while. Furthermore, he had never thought of asking him for any help at this time. It was just a little extravagant hope. Something slipped out of his hand that was hiding in his sleeve. It touched the pendant on his chest and made a clattering sound. It was slightly stunned. It lowered its head again and opened his sleeve with its jade-like hand. It took out a palm-sized piece of broken black iron. When it saw that piece of iron, its golden pupils shrank slightly. It knew this. It had appeared in his memory. It was the key to opening the big crack in the void. He had been holding on to the key all this while. Now that he had unintentionally revealed it, was he hinting at something? That key could open that big crack in the void, but in this crystallized sea of time, could it open the door? Forget it. Let's give it a try first. It shook its head and gritted its teeth fiercely. Its jade-like hand took the fragment. Energy gradually surged into the key. It gently drew an arc in the space in front of it. It was like a hard iron tool drawing a white mark on a peeling surface, but the mark left behind was difficult to erase. It was slightly stunned and looked at the fragment in its hand curiously. When it saw that the white mark did not have any movement, it was about to draw another opening. Suddenly, a sense of danger surged in its heart. Without thinking, it hurriedly retreated and hid behind a time crystal that protruded from the ground. Then a rumbling sound, like a strong wind knocking open a door, exploded in this silent sea region. Bang! A huge amount of energy suddenly surged out of the white mark that was drawn by the fragment. The energy blasted the white mark into a huge crater. An energy that was terrifying enough to make the Yuan realm tremble surged out of the crater with a rumbling sound. It brought with it the sound of a huge storm that lingered in everyone's ears. The endless storm of energy swept up all the colors in the world. It was as if all kinds of light had burst out from it, dyeing the world in all its splendor. It was like a storm, a tornado, and also a huge vortex that swallowed everything. Even the crystallized sea of time began to tremble. The surface of the crystal was like a transparent mirror. It constantly shook and trembled. Cracks tore open on the surface, and golden energy gushed out from the cracks like a spring. Under the ravaging of the god obliteration storm, the sea of time that had turned into a time crystal actually had a crack ripped open, as if it was about to return to its original state. The violent suction pulled at everything in the space. Even the mountainous time crystal could not withstand it and was about to be ripped apart. When it saw the huge crack that penetrated the inside of the sea of time, a sliver of fear surged into its golden eyes. It wanted to spread its wings and fly away, but the storm surged into the sea of time. The violent wind brought with it the power of laws and the power of shattering. It was unable to take a single step from behind the mountain. If it tried to fly out by force, its wings would definitely be snapped, and then it would be sucked into the opening of the god obliteration storm. Even if it did not move, it would still be sucked in with the mountain. Bang! A dull sound exploded behind it, causing its heart to skip a beat. It turned around abruptly and saw the dark yellow energy liquid gushing towards it like a flood. For a moment, it seemed to be scared silly. It subconsciously hugged Yin tightly and wrapped its pure white wings around the two of them. Then, an even more intense feeling of weightlessness surged into its heart. Through the gaps between its wings, it saw the time crystals exploding into pieces and losing their crystallization. The energy of the sea of time turned into an ocean once again, mixing with the time crystals here. It was stirred up by the God-Destroyer storm until the sky and earth were turned upside down. Monstrous waves that were millions of feet high and huge waves that were the size of the sun were stirred up. This ocean seemed to be about to flip over. When a huge wave hit its body head-on, it didn't hurt much. It felt the aura of the decay of time, as if several eras had passed in an instant. The force that hit its body didn't hurt, but it was very strong. It slapped them out of the sea of time and followed the suction force that came from the gigantic crack in the sky. What wrapped around it was the dark yellow seawater that seemed to have been swept up into the sky by a tornado. There were also some huge crystals that exploded one by one and turned into even more seawater that wrapped them up and rushed towards the crack. What swept past? It was the suffocating God-Destroyer storm. That energy made it, a life form that was not born in a world of order, feel the danger of a catastrophe. However, it couldn't move. It tried its best to do something, to change something, but it could only watch as the two of them got closer and closer to the gigantic crack in the void. Behind it, there was the surging and surging energy of the sea of time that was being sucked up. It rushed towards the crack like a water dragon, and they were surrounded by tens of thousands of water dragons. There was also a huge ball of liquid that wrapped around them. It was wishful thinking that this sea of time was protecting them. It was just comforting itself. How could it do such a thing? Close. Very close. In another 10 seconds, they would be swept into the God annihilation storm along with the sea of time. The huge sea of time didn't move at all. On the other hand, the God annihilation storm seemed to be even more violent and violent. When it swept up, it seemed to be able to shatter the entire void. We're done for, this voice echoed in its heart. It saw the storm that contained all the dazzling light in the world approaching at an unimaginable speed, as if they were about to fall into a black hole in an instant. That was the last thing it saw. In the next moment, it almost subconsciously hugged Yin as tightly as it could, its pure white wings wrapped tightly around the both of them. The dark yellow seawater was churned, and colorful light shone through its wings and into its eyes through its eyelids. It felt as if it was about to die. The intense pain it imagined didn't appear. There was no earth-shattering explosion of energy, and there was no pain. However, it couldn't feel anything either. It was probably due to the injury of the rules. It couldn't even feel itself anymore. No, there was still a warm body in its embrace. It was the person it had risked its life to protect. It was so warm that it gradually came back to its senses. It had to be a lie. It should have already been shattered by the divine destruction storm. Could it be that it had already entered the reincarnation road? Had it stepped into the reincarnation road with him? Even if it was this kind of ending, it didn't seem too bad. At least, it wasn't lonely. But it didn't seem to be that simple. How should it put it? It could clearly feel that it was still alive, even though it was just a little bit and a very weak feeling. It nervously swallowed a mouthful of saliva and could still feel its heart beating. Wait, could it really still be alive? It suddenly opened its eyes, and its golden pupils blossomed with a brilliant golden color. With just a glance, it almost fainted from fright. Its surroundings were filled with dazzling, colorful light in all directions. It was so blurry that it couldn't see anything. It could only feel that there was a violent energy storm wreaking havoc outside. With just a glance, its soul gave itself a few hundred warnings. They were in the divine destruction storm. At the place where the storm swept through, its body was wrapped in a dark yellow liquid. It could see that this ball of water seemed to be suspended in the air and twisted as it was blown by the wind. Some parts of the water droplets were uniformly pointing to the right, and it could feel that they were slowly advancing forward. The surrounding storm was also becoming more and more intense and violent. It had every reason to believe that even if that person came here that day, he definitely wouldn't be able to last for more than a moment. Did we survive? It slumped down with lingering fear, its entire body breaking out in cold sweat. Its consciousness could sense that beyond the dark yellow energy cluster was the infinite energy of death. Although it did not know what had happened and why the energy of the crystallized sea of time would protect them, there was no condition for it to figure out what had actually happened. Either way, it had happened just like that. There was no need to ask, for it wouldn't know even if it did. After a few minutes, it sensed that the divine destruction storm had risen to the most powerful energy level it had ever sensed in its life. In the very next instant, all the wind around it vanished, and everything became quiet. It could only feel a bright light before its eyes, and was forced to close them. When the light before its eyes dimmed a little, it then carefully opened its eyes. The storm was gone. The divine destruction storm was gone. Behind it was a mountain shrouded in a dim, starry sky. The divine destruction storm was nowhere to be seen, and the sky was dark. There was no sun, moon, or stars. There was no light. Everywhere was the scent of ashes that had burned out, and the land was scorched. The wind that blew past its body carried the scent of death, but it did not feel turbid. The air was still fresh, but the land, it looked up into the distance, a chill surging from the bottom of its heart. Was this that place? The place that had been destroyed? Chapter 1256. The name Great Void Crack was just a general term that referred to that place, but it was the place that had been destroyed. It was believed that before this place suffered such a disaster, it should have been a normal and beautiful place, or perhaps a beautiful world. Until that disaster struck, this place even lost its name and was forgotten. It was only left with the alternative name of Great Void Crack, a name that was filled with reverence and fear. If there was even a trace of respect left, perhaps it was long gone. No matter what the predecessor of this place was of the first great deity, now it only had this terrifying name. The things of the past had all been forgotten with the passing of time. Everything would be forgotten, all of it. The magnificence and nobility of this place's past was no longer something that could be seen. It did not exist in anyone's memory. What was important was what appeared before their eyes, the current scene. That's right, the current scene. The little angel slowly raised its head, holding Yun Nuashing in its arms. It stood in a circle and looked around. After confirming that it could no longer see the storm that was filled with the aura of destruction, it turned its gaze to the place where it had just been. It was a vast expanse of land with no boundaries and no signs of life. There was a starless night sky in the sky. It was pitch black, silent, and eternally silent. There was no sound of wind, no sound of insects that could be used as accompaniment to music. This place still existed, but it was already dead. Although it still existed, it was even more dead than dead. It could not imagine what this place had looked like in the past. What appeared before its eyes was a land that had been burned by flames. Gray, the color that once existed in the sky and the land, had been blown high into the sky by the flames, turning into this deathly gray and black that slowly fell down. The sky was a merciless gray and black. The silent colors were constantly being changed by the brush, outlining this unchanging space that could not be frozen forever. MMM. The person in its arms let out a sleep-talking sound and lowered its head. Yun Nuashing's forehead was sweating. She frowned and turned her head from time to time, gritting her teeth as if she was having a nightmare. She gently pressed her hand on his forehead, which was slightly hot. This temperature could probably be used to boil water. This was already the third or fourth time such a situation had occurred. His physical condition was getting worse and worse. He was clearly a great deity of origin, but he was displaying the characteristics of a human body. Is it very uncomfortable? It bent down and put its ear close to his mouth, trying to hear what he was murmuring in his sleep, but it couldn't hear anything. It seemed to be a meaningless murmur, but it could hear that he was in pain and discomfort. It raised its head. This world was very chaotic, broken, and disorderly, but there was energy. There was a weak energy flowing in this space. Its body was weakly absorbing the energy here. It wanted to gather some energy to help it recover, but in this life, it was not the godly body of the receiving spirit. This place was mixed with a lot of energy, so it did not dare to act recklessly. Hey, point me in a direction. This place, where should I go? Where should I go? The little angel held Yin Nuashing and sighed softly. In fact, it didn't really want him to answer. It just wanted him to point in a direction. It felt that his direction would be more accurate. It believed in his intuition. There were other things. It let itself wander around this barren place like a wandering soul. It didn't know when it would be able to find what it wanted to find. As for what it wanted to see, for now, it still wanted the person in its arms to recover. As for other things, such as exploring this space or doing other things, it could wait until after that. It sighed, holding Yin Nuashing in its arms, and slowly wandered around this land of ashes. This place was not much better than the place, just now, ashes. The air was also filled with the smell of the burning stars. The sky was filled with dust and sand. Oh, there was no wind in this place. It was so dark that it could not see anything beyond 100 meters. Everything outside was blurry. There was only an outline and nothing more. It was the residual aura of the rules. It was impossible for them not to see the scene in this small area clearly. It was just that the conditions here were limited. High up in the sky, it could only see a strange red light spot. It did not look like starlight. It only noticed it a few minutes ago. That starlight could not illuminate the night sky, nor could it point out any path. It was always hanging at that angle. No matter how far it went, it could not get any closer. The night was a little cold. It could not help but shrink its wings. Of course, this was the fault of the broken rules here. It seemed to have become immortal, rushing in a dark night without any starlight. It did not know where to go or where the road ahead was. It was not used to the strange air, and the cold made its physical strength deplete too quickly. Even the circulation of its energy had become slow. He curled up in its arms and slept quietly. His body leaned slightly against it. It was very warm, as if he was hugging a heater. Compared to this warmth, the cold of the night was not worth mentioning. Looking at the beautiful face, it could not help but smile. It bent its wings and used the tip of its feathers to gently rub the tip of his nose. Seeing the tip of his nose moving slightly, it could not help but laugh. When this guy was quiet, even a slight pose would become a work of art. Perhaps 4 or 5 hours had passed. The little angel slowly sat down on a stone on a hillside. However, it did not really sit on the stone. Its body always kept an inch or two away from the stone and the ground. It looked at a withered tree next to it and gently reached out its hand. However, it did not touch it. It quickly waved its hand to form a palm wind. The tree turned into a pile of black ashes and drifted between the sky and the earth. Exhaling, it stretched its body and flapped its wings. The movement of its body was a little too big. The black stone that it was sitting on dissipated with a breeze. It staggered to its feet and stumbled a few steps forward. Looking at the disappearing stone behind it, it shook its head helplessly and casually sat down on the hillside. This was not the first time it saw this place. In the beginning, it saw a lot of strange withered plants on the roadside. They seemed to be weathered buildings or strange objects. Those things existed here and once existed here. They had all become like this after the flash of destruction. They were destroyed, but they did not completely disappear. They were as fragile as the wind and sand that could be easily blown away. Sitting on the ground and resting for a while, the little angel habitually looked up at the sky. There was a stiff and bitter smile on its face. There was no sun, moon, or stars in the sky. It could not tell the time now. Maybe a few days had passed, or maybe it was only a few minutes or 2 hours, or maybe it had lost all sense of time and unexpectedly felt sleepy. It was a slight feeling that could be suppressed. After sitting in boredom for a while, it decided to continue moving forward and walk around. Where should it go? Where could it go in this world of pure destruction? Walking around for a while, it felt like it was doing something, dealing with something, comforting itself. It was a little irritated. Its holy face showed some displeasure. It knew that it was irritated. In fact, it was just to cover up another feeling. When he was not here, it always felt like it could not find its direction. It did not know what to do or where to go. When it discovered this feeling, it was startled, but it quickly calmed down. There was a bitter smile on its face, and there was a bit of self-mockery. It turned out that the attachment of those girls in its memory to it was formed like this. They were always by its side, following it closely, and after a long time, they followed its footsteps. No matter where it went, it was as if there was no one there. That kind of feeling of being at ease. Now, it was tired and fell asleep. It wandered aimlessly in this strange, dead gray world, not knowing where it was. It actually felt a little uncomfortable in its heart. The world after the apocalypse was dead silent. It was like the silence before birth. However, that period of time was when the world was at its purest. That purity would gradually weaken with the birth of life. Then countless lives would be squeezed into a world that was not spacious. Many things would happen. Karma would entangle, the rules would weaken, and the world itself would no longer be peaceful. Now, it was countless years after the apocalypse. But on the second day of the apocalypse, everything returned to peace. The world returned to its initial quiet state, but everything was lost. It was a little lost. It walked in this world without a soul. It was quiet, so quiet that it was frightening. Nonsense. It had repeated that word countless times in its mind. It was lost, lost, and its footsteps were a little shaky. However, it did not feel tired. It was just that its heart seemed to be gradually getting heavier. Unwittingly, it had crossed another plane. No, there was only one. Unwittingly, it had walked very far away. After turning around a place that resembled a basin, a cliff suddenly appeared before its eyes. The drop in a straight line could be tens of thousands of feet. The land before its eyes had sunk tens of thousands of feet. Looking at the scene before its eyes in the dark night, it was as if there were countless bizarre objects reaching up to the sky from the cliff below. There were bizarre scars, cracks in the void, and cracks in the barrier of time. All of those scars were frozen. Those were the scars left behind by that battle that could not be healed. Ugh! It had only taken a single glance for it to feel unusually uncomfortable, and hurriedly retreated from the edge of the cliff. That single glance was as if it had seen a decaying land where 10,000 worlds were buried. The continent and the other parts of the land were absolutely silent, but the place before its eyes was already emanating the scent of death and decay. It was as if tens of thousands of giants had been buried here. The stench was so strong that even a holy being like it could not stand it. It was as if a surging darkness was surging, causing it to feel a sense of scope surging in its mind. Could this be the center of that great battle? Its beautiful face was slightly pale. There was not much light, and even the simplest light and darkness could not be separated. The entire area was filled with boundless desolation and misery. There was no longer a trace of sadness, hatred, resentment, or many other feelings of unwillingness. All of them were hovering in this place, unable to dissipate. It was as if countless spirits of the dead were entrenched in this place. What a strong sense of resentment. A weak voice came from its arms, causing it to lower its head in ecstasy. It saw a pair of black eyes slowly opening. He was weak, so weak that he could not move. He raised his hand weakly and reached out towards the decaying land of death, as if he wanted to grab something. "You're awake." It smiled in surprise. Suddenly, it lowered its head and gently pecked the corner of his mouth with its soft red lips. Yinuashing had just woken up and almost fainted. When it raised its head, it gently raised its head. Its beautiful face was slightly red. "What are you doing, It suddenly woke up and stuck out its tongue. "I was affected by her memories and your memories." Yinuashing rolled its eyes. If it was not for the fact that it saw itself in a strange place filled with death and resentment, it would have been pulled back to the 139th era. Really, that action was too similar. It was exactly the same. It was just that the place where it kissed was not quite right. All right, it was not the time to think about this. Yinuashing shook its head and slowly helped it stand up. It also quickly helped it up. Their eyes met 2 to 3 inches away from each other. Both of them were stunned. Both of their faces turned slightly red, but they quickly calmed down. "Where's this lousy place?" Yin Nuoxing shook its head. It felt a little dizzy. It did not know if it was because its blood had rushed to its head or because it was too weak. "Lousy place." It smiled bitterly and stroked its long silver hair. It looked at him and was a little embarrassed. After a while, it became serious and said, "Here, but that place. You actually called it a lousy place." Yin Nuoxing's expression changed. That place. Yes, he was in the sea of time just now. In the crystallized sea of time, he seemed to have heard a faint, resentful voice and inadvertently took out the black iron key. If that was the case, F***CK, don't tell me I'm in the Great Void Crack. The little angel scratched its cheek and nodded seriously. His face, which had just turned a little red, instantly turned pale again. He almost fell down again. A few minutes later, the two of them kept walking along the cliff. It was a very long cliff. If this place was a planet, Yin Nuoxing would think that it was a cliff that circled around the planet like a watermelon. If they kept walking like this, they might come back to the same place. However, he did not know whether this place was a continent or something else. The rotting land of death at the bottom of the cliff was still there, but it gradually disappeared on the other side. They walked for a long time, and that place also gradually disappeared behind them. In front of them was a perilous wonder. He felt that he might have come to the other side of the planet. In front of him was an unfamiliar small basin. Although it was called a basin, it was more like a large crater created by something falling from above. Also, there were traces of battle everywhere. Some of the scars penetrated from the void to the ground. The sky was broken like broken glass, and there were constantly fragments falling into the void. That space was still stubbornly recovering, but it would never recover. It had resisted for a whole 11 years. For many lives, it was an eternity. This battlefield, this place, was full of countless traces of being torn apart by the rules and destroyed by a higher power. It was difficult to repair. The damage caused to this place was eternal, and there was a lot of that energy left. The energy of the heavenly god of origin, it whispered. Yin Nuoxing nodded. There was a lot, and he felt a familiar aura. It could be considered as familiar. He could not help but raise his head and look at the strange red light spot in the sky. He could not help but frown. A familiar aura. Should we go up and take a look? Chapter 12:57. At the bottom of the cliff, there was another space that was even more broken. It was completely different from the world of ashes here. A depressing, dull sound slowly spread, as if an unimaginable giant beast was crawling in the depths of the dark land. The sound of heartbeats and breathing shrouded the entire land. Some kind of indescribable energy was transmitted from the depths of the dark land to the air, and the resentment that lingered there condensed into a dizzying sound. The strange breath and energy made many disorderly images surge out from the depths of the mind, as if nightmares had come true and become physical things. The physical nightmares disappeared without a trace with the faint sound of hymns. The shadows quietly retreated. On the cliff, the sacred light became the first ray of light in 11 years. It did not pierce the darkness, nor did it drive away the cold, but it silenced some of the things that were moving in the dark. It took about 4 hours. In the blur, they could only confirm an approximate time, and there should be a big margin of error. Yin Nuoxing and her person had circled the planet in this short period of time. Yes, this time they were really sure. They walked around the cliff and went back to the place where they came from. They also recognized the full appearance of the ash planet. Unfortunately, they only saw the outline of the ash planet. The planet had been burned by fire. The long night had ruled it for 11 eras, and if there were no accidents in the future, it would continue to rule it. This planet had been dead for almost an eternity, but refused to be completely silent. In the deep darkness, it seemed to have seen the two guests who had barged in. It was so excited that it shivered, and then its whole body cracked open as if it was laughing. This statement was a little exaggerated. After all, Only the dark and deep region was shaking, cutting off the sun. It was a region that had sunk 10,000 feet. Looking down at the planet from the star system, one could clearly see the sunken crater. The place was filled with endless resentment, hatred, enmity, and some strange energy. These were the remnants of the primordial great deity or a life form similar to it. Together, they formed a bizarre scene in the region. Those scenes would only appear in front of Yin Nuashing and her person. It was like an illusion. The disgust and disgust that the little angel felt was also caused by the scene. The illusion and the real scene overlapped, and even the sound produced by the illusion rang in their ears. A dull and violent sound rang out, and a huge pillar of dust rushed into the sky. Then, the dark land split apart in front of them. Bright energy sparks spewed out from the cracks, and the pillar of dust was dyed a brilliant blue by the light. The crack pushed forward like a stormy wave, and it only stopped when it reached the cliff on the other side. In the middle, more cracks spread from all directions and collided with each other. The center of the basin suddenly collapsed, and the blue light burst out like a volcanic eruption, illuminating the entire sky. In the sky, the strange red starlight painted a ferocious and distorted face, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws like the shadow of a demon. All of this, until a faintly discernible hymn sounded, all of it dissipated like smoke in the eye. Only then did Yin Nuashing watch the scene, just now without any emotion. Now, seeing that everything in front of him had stopped abruptly and the crater on the planet had returned to its original state, he closed his eyes lightly, and after a moment, he slowly opened them again. Everything was actually an illusion. Only the abnormal red star hanging in the sky did not change. No matter where they went, no matter how they changed their direction, it was always in the sky right in front of them. He waved his hand to stop the little angel from releasing the divine power. The strange illusion made him worry if there was something still active in this place. If there was really something that had survived the energy explosion. It was scary just thinking about it. It was better not to think about it. Everything just now was an illusion. She gently floated down from the sky and retracted her wings behind her. Looking at the dark land in front of her, as if it had been reborn, she was a little stunned. The scene was too real, and she could not tell if it was real or not. Yin Nuashing pointed at her temple. This place was confused by the energy of the outside world, and there was a deviation in your perception, so you thought that everything was real. Well, now that you have woken up from the dream, you don't have to care about anything. Just treat it as if you had an absurd and strange dream. The little angel rubbed her eyes. The illusion seemed to be lingering in her eyes, and it affected her vision. While rubbing her eyes, she felt that her hand was pulled, and her body floated up again. She quickly opened her eyes. Yin Nuashing was pulling her forward slowly, as if she was going to circle around the cliff again. Are you going to circle around again? She continued to rub her eyes, blinking from time to time. She felt that something was lingering in her eyes. There's nothing much you can do by staying here. Moreover, it's easy to hallucinate while standing here. Your divine power isn't strong enough. It's a little hard to deal with the abnormal resentment left behind on the dark land. The hallucinations will come back. Yin Nuashing turned around to look at it and said softly. They circled around the cliff aimlessly and returned to the huge gap. The more they looked at it, the more they felt that the dark land was in the middle of a mountain range. They could not see the other parts of the cliff except for this gap. They could also see the broken scene shrouded in the night of resentment and many traces of destruction. Before countless rounds of hallucinations were born, Yin Nuashing pulled the little angel back to a place where they could not see the dark land and sat down. The two people looked at each other for a long time and sighed at the same time. She stole a glance at him. She was depressed and a little confused. She was the same as she was a few hours ago. But this time, she felt much more at ease when she saw him. It was that feeling again. That feeling of relief, and relief made it roll its eyes. It seemed that it would have to change its image after going out this time. However, it faintly felt that it was not bad. It seemed that it unexpectedly had the heart of a young girl. Yin Nuoxing suddenly felt goosebumps. He suddenly raised his head to look at it, only to see that it was looking up at the red light spot in the sky. He also raised his head. It noticed his gaze and asked softly, "What is that red light?" Yin Nuoxing looked up and remained silent. She blew out a breath and messed up her bangs. She said, "Who knows?" "You're lying," she said without looking at him. "Okay, actually I might know." Yin Nuoxing smiled and hugged his bent knees with both hands, swaying his body. That person, something related to that person. I'm not very clear about the specifics. That person. She was slightly stunned. She lowered her head and saw the complicated look in his eyes. She seemed to know something. That god of destruction. Only her. Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh of relief. She stared at him for a long time and pursed her red lips until the atmosphere became heavy again. Then she said softly, "Actually, I seem to have found something strange. Don't say it. You didn't see anything." She did not know whether to laugh or cry when she saw that he did not want to listen. She shook her head and said, "Listen to me. I think you must have seen it too. If I can see it, there's no reason that you can't see it. Right? Ahem. Don't say it. Can't we just pretend that we didn't see it?" Yin Nuoxing sighed and looked at her with some resentment. "It's no use for you to look at me like this. We are now trapped in this place and can't find a way out. Even if we get out, we won't be able to find a solution. So, we have to solve the problem in this place before we can get out, right?" As she spoke, she seemed to be talking to herself. She raised her head and flapped her wings unconsciously. "Actually, I have a rough idea. Maybe you know more, or maybe you know the same as me. Just stay here and do nothing. I don't have any opinions. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But you..." She lowered her head and looked at Yin Nuoxing, who looked a little unhappy. She smiled and said, "You care a lot about the outside world. We have been cut off from the outside world for a long time. We will be worried about you." Yin Nuoxing stood up with a bang, startling her. He looked gloomy and said, "Let's go." She shivered and shrunk her neck. "Where are we going?" "To the place you urged me to go." He rolled his eyes and angrily grabbed its hand. Then, he turned around and walked towards the cliff. He walked faster and faster. That expression, this scene, in this dark night, from his back, one could almost see the tragic expression on his face. Why don't you think about it again? I think it's not a big deal. Maybe we can solve it by going to other places. Hey, you really want to go? Wait a minute, I'm afraid of heights." Ignoring the little angel behind him who could not even find an excuse, Yin Nuoxing reached out and pulled it into his arms. Then he pulled it and jumped off the cliff. The distance between the two people and the dark land was rapidly decreasing. It saw that the shadow that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws seemed to be extending its strange palms and arms, as if it was inviting them to become one of its members. The wind that blew against its face contained an eternal and crazy resentment. It could clearly feel something. The energy that was spreading in the air. The one who caused this world to shatter was that god. That's how it is. Hearing her words, Yin Nuoxing answered matter-of-factly. In that picture, in that record, in front of that throne, the god of destruction triggered an energy destruction in everything. You reminded me. I just remembered that this place is different from the place I've seen before. Maybe what? She suddenly forgot her fear and asked curiously. Yin Nuoxing was silent for a while. He sighed and adjusted his angle to land. "Let's talk about it later. I'm not very sure." Just as he was about to land on the dark land, the little angel suddenly spread his wings and flapped them a few times. The strong wind blew away the black dust on the ground. Yin Nuoxing saw that the strange dust was squirming like mud and retreating. It was not a posture of being blown away. Immediately, he became vigilant. Ugh! She had just landed on the ground with Yin Nuoxing when she suddenly covered her forehead. Her brows were tightly knitted, and there was a look of discomfort and pain on her face. Seeing this, Yin Nuoxing held the nether void sword in front of him and walked 2 steps forward to block her. "What's wrong?" "Sounds, but I don't understand." Her answer was not out of Yin Nuoxing's expectations. After hearing her words, he wrinkled his nose and said, "Don't listen. Don't listen to those things. They're not anything good. In this place that was filled with endless resentment, the resentment left behind by the heavenly god of origin or some other strange life form of the same level as the heavenly god of origin, the sounds she heard were definitely not anything good. Fortunately, she couldn't understand what the resentment in this place was saying. The little angel nodded obediently. After blocking her own senses, the discomfort she felt was greatly reduced. Were those things? Were they? Yin Nuashing tilted his head and looked around. He said, some lingering thoughts of the dead heavenly gods. Their whispers are filled with undying resentment. I suddenly understand something. In this place, those low and crazy voices, if you listen to too many of them, you might become... He kept using his eyes to point at some places in front of him, as if he was hinting at something. She was slightly stunned. She also looked at the squirming sludge around her, and her pretty face turned slightly pale. Did he mean that she would become one of those things? Her face turned pale, and she tugged at his sleeve. Were those things? Things that are born from the accumulation of resentment. They don't have any intelligence. You can think of them as some kind of vengeful spirit, but they're not the usual vengeful spirits. Yin Nuashing pointed at the black sludge that was still squirming. He thought for a moment, and then put down the netherworld ruin sword in front of him. The elements of destruction spread out from his body, and his eyes turned pure black. Even the whites of his eyes disappeared. Follow me closely. Don't stray too far away. She quickly grabbed his arm and followed behind him step by step. When she saw that the mud-like vengeful spirits were retreating because of the elements of destruction, she relaxed a little. She was a little curious. Since when can your elements of destruction be used to drive away vengeful spirits? Yin Nuashing staggered, and his face darkened. These aren't vengeful spirits. Forget it. He shook his head and gave up on talking nonsense with her. He explained seriously, these are just low-level life forms condensed from the undying obsessions left behind by the fallen gods. In my eyes, they can't even be considered life forms. For low-level life forms like these, what they're most afraid of is energy similar to the element of annihilation. This kind of energy that can distort everything is almost their natural enemy. She was a little relieved after hearing that, but she still didn't dare to relax. This strange dark land. She seemed to see many black claws reaching out from the ground and the air and from the cracks in space. But when she got closer, she found that there was nothing. Bang! A piece of space debris fell from the sky and landed beside the two people. A certain frightened little angel was startled. She grabbed Yin Nuashing and almost pulled him to the ground. Yin Nuashing looked at her frightened face and felt helpless. Why didn't he know that this guy had a timid side? Because I'm scared. After walking into this place, I felt that something was wrong all over my body. It was as if there were millions of pairs of eyes full of resentment staring at us from all directions. The owners of those gazes wanted to kill us at any time, anywhere, and divide us up and eat us. Yin Nuashing was speechless at that time. He carefully thought about that scene and had goosebumps all over his body. It had to be said that this little angel had succeeded in giving him a fright. Where are we going? After walking for a few minutes, the little angel finally couldn't help but ask. To the depths, to the place where we want to go. These words, which seemed to be guided by something, made the little angel's heart skip a beat. She thought that he was also being controlled. She quickly reached out her hand and pinched his face. When she saw him looking at her in pain and confusion, she withdrew her hand in embarrassment. I thought you were killed without knowing. Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh. Had you ever thought about how this world was destroyed? Yin Nuashing suddenly changed the topic. This world? He tilted his head. According to my memory. Oh, according to your memory, it was caused by the god of destruction, right? The god of destruction had released all of her energy. A powerful explosion of energy had destroyed everything. At least, that was what he saw in his memory. However, he seemed to have said something that caught his attention. You said that this place... Yin Nuashing raised the netherworld ruin sword. The elements of annihilation danced on the tip of the sword, dispersing some of the vengeful spirits that were not afraid of death. He even casually killed some of them. Indeed, I just noticed that this place is not quite the same as the scene I saw. Not quite. Yin Nuashing nodded. He waved the Netherworld Ruins sword and pointed at this place. He said softly, "This place and the place behind it are not the same as the scene I saw. Over there, she was standing on that throne with her back facing those. Here, I can't see anything. I can't see the shattered temple or the shattered throne. If they were destroyed, nothing should be left behind. However, here, do you think that the god of destruction released all of her divine energy and divinity would leave behind such strange things?" The little angel shook her head. With the heavenly destruction god's power, he would be able to annihilate even a ghost if he were to unleash his full power. How could he have left behind such a strange place? Could it be that this isn't a spatial rift? Yin Nuashing shook his head. The passage you opened in the sea of time with the key does indeed lead to the great void fissure. However, we never knew what was going on inside the great void fissure. Who told you that this was definitely the place where the god of origin fell? Is there anything else? He widened his eyes and raised his head. Suddenly, he thought of something. Wait, you mean the great void fissure is not just a single place? This is an entire region? A destroyed star region? According to what we know, there is an 80% chance that this is the case. Yin Nuashing sighed and nodded. Seeing this, his golden eyes narrowed slightly. Then where's the real place? Yin Nuashing remained silent. He waved the Netherworld Ruins sword and sent out 2 streaks of sword chi that contained energy, dispersing the vengeful spirits that approached him. He walked forward for a long distance before he freed up a hand and slowly extended it toward the sky. He raised his head and looked in the direction he was pointing at. His breathing became sluggish. It was that red star. There, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. How we get to that place? This, I really don't know. Yin Nuashing shook his head. However, I know how this place was formed. Look at this dark land. Look at its shape on this planet. Doesn't it look like he drew a circle with his hand and then poked it with his finger? He looked at it and said, "It couldn't have been killed by the god of destruction, right? Then, isn't this the place where the enemies of the god of origin were at during the Battle of the Gods all those years ago?" Probably. Seeing her pretty face pale, Yin Nuashing smiled very unscrupulously and nodded. Chapter 1258. This dark land, this planet that Yin Nuashing and the others mistook as the only region of the Great Void Fissure, was actually a planet that was destroyed by the gods of origin in the battle back then. Needless to say, this planet was a foothold or a base camp of the enemy. They had only discovered this after the fact. Now that they knew, the little angel instantly had goosebumps all over his body and almost fainted. This feeling was exactly the same as thinking that one was walking in hell. But in reality, one was walking in a deeper hell. Otherwise, why was it said that the ignorant were fearless? But now, I understand why this place has become like this. It patted its chest and sighed. I thought that the home of the heavenly god of origin and the others would be destroyed like this after that battle. To build such a dark and deep thing in the enemy's home. How should I put it? It's a little sad. The protectors of the Da Yuan realm, the gods of origin. If their temple was really like this, it would be a little too tragic. Yin Nuashing sighed and said softly to himself, "How rare can such things be?" The little angel turned around and was startled when he saw Yin Nuashing's gloomy look. If that was the case, something similar had happened to this guy, and it had happened many times. The realm of the gods that he guarded had been destroyed several times, but there were many beings in the realm of the gods that he guarded that did not allow him to exist. The dark temple that he had built was exiled in the void of the divine land of darkness and occupied by the manifestations of the void mist. How different could these things be from what he had just imagined? It's good that it landed here. I still can't find a way to get to that red star now. So, I came here to take a look and understand what happened back then. As Yin Nuashing walked, he suddenly squatted down and picked up a broken crystal that was buried in the ground from the pile of black ashes. He stared at the crystal, and a divine light bloomed in his eyes. I have always been curious. Back then, those origin great deities who stood at the peak of the great primordial realm, what exactly did they encounter during the end of the mythological era? And what exactly happened that caused all of them to fall? You've discussed this topic with Violet Knight before. With its hands behind its back, it bent over and stared at the shard. Perhaps something big happened. Perhaps it was an internal strife, or something even scarier than that. Or perhaps the dark side of this world, just like the sin of the world that you've been tainted with, something came out from the dark side of the world. In any case, something big must have happened. It was just a casual remark, saying whatever came to its mind. However, the possibility of that happening was minuscule and infinitely close to zero. It was almost impossible for it to happen. Things that belonged to the dark side of the world would not come out of their own accord, and it was impossible for anything abnormal to be born there. Yin Nuashing's situation was purely his own bad luck. He brought this seed with him to the bottom of the conceptual layer of the rules, causing that thing in the conceptual layer of the rules to come closer. In the end, he came into contact with the sins of the world that he was now shouldering. Yin Nuashing stood up and twirled the transparent shard with 2 fingers. With a gentle rub, the shard disappeared. Perhaps it's just a small matter. To them, it's a small matter. Perhaps it's just a conflict. But to the people below, it's a small matter of their ladder. To them and us, it's a big matter that could easily involve the whole world and the whole primordial realm. In the end, it's a matter of life and death. The void is destroyed and the primordial realm is shattered. In the end, the cause of the beginning is just one primordial god being stepped on by another primordial god, Yin Nuashing yawned. He was just describing it like that. If he really wanted to guess what actually happened, he would never be able to guess it in his lifetime. There were countless conditions for what happened and how it happened. Guessing was useless. Well, if you put it that way, you're right. It shook its head helplessly. The life from the higher ladder was too powerful and indescribable for the life from the lower ladder. Even a small matter would not be the same in the eyes of the life from the lower ladder. The life from the higher ladder just moved a finger casually, and the life from the higher ladder would have to kneel down and surrender to be slaughtered. It was so similar, just like what was happening in the underworld right now. Looking at the crystal shard falling to the ground, the surrounding sludge wriggled back a long distance, as if it had seen its natural enemy. It seemed to be afraid of the transparent and colorless crystal. This was an open space where there were no black wraiths. The reason was that the colorless crystal had dissipated all of its energy over a long period of time that was close to eternity. Nothing could be seen. These things are really interesting. They are obviously so afraid of the crystal and your element of annihilation, but they refuse to retreat. Instead, they are hovering around a certain distance away to watch. When we walk past them, they will crowd together again. It could not help but say as it watched the black sludge retreat and begin to hover around them. Things without intelligence are not life. They only have instinctive functions to seek luck and avoid danger. They don't know what fear is at all. It's normal that they have no emotions. Yin Nuashing said casually. He pulled out the netherworld ruined sword from the ground and waved it, pretending to attack in front of him. However, there was no movement. Whether it was him or the black sludge, there was no movement. Then he really gathered the element of annihilation this time and forcefully waved a sword aura in front of him. The sword aura only shot out 3 to 4 meters before dissipating. However, it caused the black sludge that had gathered in front of him to retreat a few dozen meters. It was too late to dodge. You see, things without intelligence will not dissipate until they see the real element of annihilation. Even if it was a group of small pets or some other life with intelligence, after seeing me do the same thing so many times, they would have a conditioned reflex, Yin Nuashing said as he continued to walk forward. The little angel followed behind him with a strange expression. But I thought that this was a very scary place. It should be filled with endless demons, ghosts, or something else. I didn't expect that there would only be a group of soft, vengeful spirits. Is there really nothing else other than that? It kept looking at its surroundings. There were ghostly hands made of strange energy that were reaching into the real world through the spatial rifts, as well as strange energy that was spreading out from the ground, and more. They were all terrifying and unsettling, like twisted shadows in the dark night, all gathered in this place. That was what it had seen in a shallow dream, but the reality left it dumbfounded. There was only so much. Other than the black ashes and the sludge, there was nothing else. What are these ashes? It carefully picked up a little bit of the black ashes with 2 fingers and looked at Yin Nuashing, who was digging a hole with a netherworld ruin sword. Yin Nuashing raised his head and looked at the sky. The ashes that burned the sky. Everything that this world once had, including the rules, space, and many other things, have been destroyed countless times. Countless times. The black ashes are the ashes of the dead world core. It is a silent eulogy. The little angel had an expressionless face. All right, she knew for sure that this was something that had once existed in this world that had been destroyed by the gods of origin. Void, time, space, energy, rules, and many more things. Tangible and intangible things had all fused together in a chaotic manner, and after they were destroyed, they became this black ash that filled the entire world. Yep, that's right. This fellow loved to exaggerate and stir up emotions with his words. She would not fall for his tricks. Perhaps even the heart of the world has been destroyed, becoming a part of the dust. Logically speaking, this space should not continue to exist. The core of this space has suffered a destructive blow from the first great deity, and even the space itself has been destroyed. Yet, it is still standing here in perfect condition. There is simply something wrong with it. Oh, I can't say that it is in perfect condition. After all, whether it is damaged or not, it is also not a good situation. Yin Nuashing sneered and shook his head. The little angel glanced at him and raised his head to look at the sky. I feel that this matter is not small. Think about it. With the uniqueness and strength of the great gods of origin and the others, how could it be so easy to kill them one by one? Back then, there must have been countless lives that surrounded them. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes and said, "You're spouting nonsense. When have the powerful first-generation great deities ever done something that would cause them to suffer a loss? Back then, when they slaughtered their way to the front of the great deities, it must have been due to the power of countless lives and countless forces piled up together. The latter and the others never returned, but fortunately, they also suffered heavy injuries." He was slightly stunned. Didn't they just give it to them? Not to that extent. There should be something else behind this. That's right. When I saw the murals back then, I felt at first glance that the matter might not be so simple. If the lives of the mortal world took action, then they must have been accomplices. But accomplices are only accomplices. To put it bluntly, they are just a bunch of cannon fodder. The ones who really did the work are lives of the same level as them. He sighed helplessly. He had said this many times, but what exactly did these lives of the same level refer to? What exactly did the great gods of origin who protected the entire great primordial realm encounter? You're asking me? Yin Nuashing stared at him with wide eyes. I've already thought about this question for several decades. How would I know what exactly they encountered? Back then, Purple Knight said that things might not be as simple as imagined. How could the protectors of the great primordial realm fall so easily and so easily? Then is it possible that they actually fell just to put on a show or something? And then, before he could finish speaking, Yin Nuashing shook his head and denied it. The price is too great. Moreover, what kind of show do they need to put on? Is it related to this world? Is it related to this great primordial realm? What kind of difficulties do they have that they have to show weakness to the enemy or give in? I don't think it's possible. He laughed bitterly. He had already mentioned the possible situation, so he must have thought about this matter himself. However, he felt that it was not very reliable and was not very scientific, so he denied it again. The two people walked to the front of this dark land without any obstructions. They saw a huge mountain form from a mass of sludge that was at least 10,000 feet tall. The huge body was wriggling like ripples, causing the two people to roll their eyes. They almost threw up the New Year's Eve dinner from 10 years ago. How did this thing grow so big? She could not help but roll her eyes, her beautiful face pale. After a moment, she used her wings to cover her eyes. She felt that it was better not to look. It was too disgusting. Such a huge thing was wriggling in front of her. Yin Nuoxing laughed dryly. He was thinking about what to do next. Suddenly, he was stunned. He noticed something and stared straight at the mountain-like sludge monster. Then, he shuddered violently. Goosebumps appeared on his skin and made his hair stand on end. What's wrong? She was stunned for a moment when she saw his reaction. Although she did not know what he was thinking, she felt an inexplicable chill in her heart. There's something in there, Yin Nuoxing said softly. She pointed at the mountain-like sludge. That point almost made the little angel faint. After a long while, it came back to its senses. It looked at Yin Nuoxing, whose expression had changed drastically and had a determined expression as if he was facing death with equanimity. Its stomach churned. You're not really going in, are you? It seems to be something that belongs to her. Although I'm not sure if it's something that she left behind or something that belongs to her. Anyway, that thing has her scent. I think. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes and made a retching gesture. She took a deep breath and said in a relaxed tone, If I don't come back, you can take the Netherworld Ruin sword back. Oh, by the way, I still have a small house in China. I remember that I hid something there. The little angel sniffed and looked sad. Do you want me to inherit it? I want you to help me destroy it. It's a little toy that I made back then. I couldn't bear to destroy it, and I couldn't hide it. I didn't even think of throwing it into the pendant. Sigh, it would be so embarrassing if others saw it. The little angel was confused. Then I'll go. Yin Nuoxing smiled and turned around. His long windbreaker fluttered as his aura surged. He strode towards the huge mud block that was the size of a mountain. The mud block did not seem to feel him, or it seemed that it had stopped moving. Yin Nuoxing could feel that the breath of the mountain was so weak that it was about to be extinguished. It was probably dying. Although he did not know if this kind of thing that looked like a vengeful spirit had the concept of life and death. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and stepped into the black mud. His vision suddenly turned black, and his body seemed to have fallen into a swamp. The water was full of suction and also had a strong repelling force. He tried his best to hold his breath. There was only the red, glowing object in his eyes. He reached out his hand. The whole process was too horrible to look at. Anyway, that was what the little angel felt. It was tragic. The lump of sludge was directly blown into powder by the overly irritable Yin Nuoxing. When he stepped on the black mud that fell from the sky like a black rain, he walked out with a black face. He was holding a diamond-shaped crystal in his hand, and it was still emitting a bright red light. The destructive power in the light kept coming into contact with the elements of nirvana that emerged from his palm, and it kept being annihilated. Fortunately, the heavenly god of origin had died many years ago. This was just one of her items that was contaminated with energy. However, Yin Nuoxing had to use all his strength to resist the destructive power so that it would not be destroyed by the destructive power. I dug it out. Yin Nuoxing's face was dark with a hint of green. There's only a ball of energy inside. There's nothing else. But it doesn't matter. I have a way to use this crystal to go where we want to go. How do you do it? It asked in surprise. When it saw that he was trying to hold back his vomiting expression, it restrained its surprise. In short, Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and sat down on the black ground. Damn it. Let me rest for a while. I'm going to throw up. Chapter 1259. The Black Land welcomed a special rain. It was sticky, like hail, but much softer than ice. When it fell to the ground, it made patter-patter sounds like the sound of meat slapping on the ground. That sound made Yin Nuoxing, who was sitting at the side, have another layer of goosebumps, as if he thought of the feeling of crawling into that thing. Being pressed into the toilet was just like this. It seems that the latter is more disgusting. It's better not to discuss this topic. Yin Nuoxing's heart trembled. Seeing the expression on Hao Ren's face change constantly while he was resting, the little angel couldn't help but roll his eyes. What are you thinking about? Hurry up and recover and leave this place. I don't want to stay in this godforsaken place for even a moment longer. Yin Nuashin glanced at him and shook his head. It seemed that he wasn't the only one whose expression was changing constantly. It wasn't that he was afraid of this place. Indeed, this place was suspected to be the base camp of the gods of Origin's enemies, and there was still something left in this place. It sounded quite scary, but it wouldn't affect their movements. However, fear was one thing. If it were anyone else, they would be disgusted at the sight of this wriggling mass of unknown black things. Even the gods of Origin had fallen into a sh*T pit when they went out. TSK, let's not talk about this topic. The little angel swung the nether void sword to intimidate the approaching black sludge, forcing it to retreat. However, the non-sentient things turned back after retreating a certain distance. The little angel's pretty face turned pale. If it weren't for the fact that it had become an energy life form, it would have already lost its stomach. It would have been able to talk like a river by now. Don't you feel that these things are becoming more active? Hurry up and do something. The little angel was a little shaken when he saw that the wraiths were getting closer and closer. However, he couldn't really make them retreat with the nether void sword. If he really wanted to kill them, he had no choice but to kill such a large mass of them. This was an unknown territory. If something unexpected happened while he was killing them, they wouldn't be able to survive. Yin Nuashin came back to his senses and saw that the wraiths were wriggling on the ground. They were very eager to get closer. He pondered for a moment and looked down at the red crystal in his hand. Suddenly, he had an idea. He stood up, raised the red crystal high, and waved it left and right. The vengeful spirits that were being expelled by the little angel suddenly arched high into a ball like a jellyfish. Then, as Yin Nuashin waved the red crystal left and right, it shook its funny body. This scene also stunned the little angel. It turned back and saw that he was holding the crystal, and it suddenly understood. That thing is attractive to them. Yin Nuashin waved the crystal and observed it for a moment. Then, she shook her head and said, "If you say it's an attractive force, I think it should be an instinctive action. They probably want to bury this crystal. Think about it. I noticed this crystal in the body of the vengeful spirit that was as big as a mountain. Before that, you didn't feel any energy fluctuation. Now," he was stunned for a moment. After thinking for a moment, he roughly understood what he meant. Now, the crystal was in his hand. It was constantly emitting a terrifying power of destruction. Just a strand of energy could probably, after a little calculation, it was probably enough to destroy everything in the planet-sized area under his feet hundreds of millions of times. Fortunately, he could suppress it a little with the elements of destruction. Suppress? He smiled bitterly and shook his head. How could it be suppressed? Even if the great heavenly god of Origin had passed away, this was still her energy. This energy was enough to cause the entire Yuan realm to shake. Fortunately, the heavenly god of destruction had died. That was why he dared to use his energy to suppress it. Phew! Yin Nuashin slowly breathed a sigh of relief. His hand, which was holding the red crystal, was trembling. He was on the verge of death. It was the same when he took the core of the divine power scepter of the heavenly god of destruction. Today, he even touched her energy directly. He felt that the things he had done were enough for him to jump on the road of reincarnation tens of thousands of times. Forget it. I'm not going to rest. Yin Nuashin took a deep breath. He raised his hand and let the crystal float in the air. His hands slowly wrote mysterious characters in the air. Following the appearance of those characters, there was a faint rumbling sound. It was as if all the living beings in the universe were saying something in a low voice. The little angel's expression froze, and her gaze became a little more solemn. That was a divine language, and the heavenly god of Origin's power could indeed make it work correctly, or perhaps correctly. However, the last few times she used this power, she had been fine, so she'll be fine now. With a wave of his hand, the 12 characters of the god's generation slowly closed up and wrapped around the red crystal. A spell formation slowly rose from under Yin Nuoxing's feet. A transparent pillar of light, about a meter tall, enveloped him. The spell formation under his feet slowly rose along the pillar of light under his control. Come over quickly. The teleportation is about to begin. Yin Nuoxing reached out to the little angel and said softly. His right hand was still writing characters of the god's generation in the air. These characters were even more complicated and unimaginable. The little angel quickly came back to its senses and floated back with a Netherruin sword in hand. Its body flickered as it appeared behind Yin Nuoxing. The vengeful spirits, who were no longer intimidated by the Netherruin sword, also surged toward the crystal in front of the two of them from all directions. After Yin Nuoxing finished writing the last character, he looked at the tide of vengeful spirits surging toward them. A wicked smile appeared on his face. He grabbed the last character with his right hand and turned it upside down. The spell formation under his feet also rose to the top of the pillar of light. A ring of light rapidly spread out from the center of the spell formation. The two of them were enveloped in a brilliant red light as they shot toward the sky. As the two of them started to teleport, the remaining Kanzaki runes extinguished one by one. However, one Kanzaki rune remained in place, emitting a moving radiance. A huge amount of energy surged within that rune. The black sludge froze on the spot because it lost its target. It stood there blankly until it saw the rune flickering with a dazzling light. It looked at it blankly as it expanded into an incomparably huge amount of energy. Boom! The roar of energy with the extreme impact of the laws attracted the little angel's attention. He quickly turned around and saw that in the dark galaxy, a black planet had suddenly become abnormally bright. A red and black beam of light containing destructive energy descended from the sky and bombarded the ground. The huge force caused the planet to deviate from its original position. It was as beautiful as the brightest flash in the galaxy. The little angel was slightly stunned. He thought of Yin Nuoxing's actions and suddenly realized something. When Yin Nuoxing saw him looking at him, he couldn't help but grin and give him a thumbs up. Satisfied, the little angel smiled and nodded. Yes, but this is the Great Void Rift. In this space, is it really okay for you to cause such a huge commotion in this space? The smile on Yin Nuoxing's face froze. His stiff expression showed that he had completely forgotten about this matter when he was destroying the planet. Looking at the little angel's half-smile, he said to him jokingly, "What if I cause some trouble?" Yin Nuoxing was sweating profusely. He was about to quibble when he suddenly raised his head and pointed forward. "Look, we're here." The little angel rolled its eyes at the person who changed the topic. He didn't want to talk nonsense with him. He turned his head and saw that the abnormal red light was rapidly approaching. It was a very large size, but it was just a halo. When they got closer, the scarlet light instantly became much dimmer. Their vision was not completely filled with the dazzling red. However, in this space that was covered by the red halo, there were many abnormal light spots. They were like the stars in the galaxy, but these light spots were very close and very small. The red starlight that seemed to be extremely far away was actually right in front of their eyes. Moreover, they were really only the size of a little finger. They were like mini stars that were emitting light and heat. Of course, this level of light and heat could not even burn an ordinary person to death. What small star? Are these the crystallization of the energy of the god of destruction? As he flew past the galaxy, he reached out and grabbed a dim star. He played with it in the palm of his hand and said. Yin Nuoxing carefully observed this space. After a moment of silence, he shook his head. It doesn't seem like it. These stars have the aura of real stars. However, they don't have any destructive power. They are so small. It's almost impossible. These are real stars. His expression changed slightly. Yin Nuoxing nodded and observed it carefully for a while. He took the dim star from its hand and observed it for a few seconds. He said, "I'm afraid these are real. They used to be real, but a huge energy explosion turned them into this. If this is true, then these small stars around us might have been normal stars until the day they met with a disaster." That's right, it was that day. The last scene of that battle was probably when the god of destruction took her last breath. Her powerful and extreme energy caused a series of destruction. Not only did she kill her enemies, but she also changed the things that once existed in this world. Perhaps this was the main reason why this galaxy was so empty. The little angel looked suspiciously at the small glowing marble in his hand. Suddenly, he clenched his fist tightly. After a moment, he felt an explosion in his palm. A faint stinging and burning sensation spread across his palm. He was so frightened that he let out a small cry and hurriedly shook his hand. Yin Nuoxing heard the cry and turned around to look at him. Seeing him like this, he could roughly guess what had happened. He shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. I already said that these were real stars. Why did you use so much strength to pinch them? How would I know that they would explode? He shook his hand and said, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. I didn't really pinch the sun. How do you know that they would explode? Did you pinch them before? Yin Nuoxing fell silent. It seemed that there were not many people in history who were bored enough to deliberately pinch the sun with their hands. Of course, he was one of them. However, he could not say this out loud. Otherwise, he would definitely be laughed at for a long time. He made up his mind and hurriedly looked ahead. He took a light breath and said, "Look ahead. It's here, it's here. You're trying to divert our attention again." He shook his head in annoyance. However, he did not argue with him. He raised his head and looked ahead. He was also stunned. The two of them flew through the teleportation channel that was wrapped in red light. The teleportation channel curved like a bridge, and its final destination was in front of them. It was a huge continent that was wrapped in a colorful energy barrier. A continent. It was familiar, but also unfamiliar. The faint sense of familiarity came from the murals they had seen 2 or 3 times. That's right, they were murals that Hui had transformed from the information extracted from the bottom of the Sea of the Gods. One of the murals depicted a battle between 2 huge continents separated by the God's realm. One of the continents was 40 to 50% similar to the one in front of them. Sure enough, that is where the gods of origin are. That mural is real. Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh. Sweat seeped out of his forehead. He had always been curious as to why the god's realm had records of that battle. He thought that it was fake, or that the god's realm had some kind of relationship with that world. Now, it seemed that the god's realm was probably just one of the many battlefields, and a very important one at that. Then, according to the memories that belonged to the Eye of the Ocean, the last energy explosion should not be too far from the god's realm. It should be in the same world of light. Therefore, the great void crack had floated out from the center of the 8 elements realm's void and into the depths of the void where they were now. Of course, this was of no use right now. The most important thing right now was, I think that the colorful barrier might not let us in. I can imagine the two of us crashing into it in 20 seconds and turning into pancakes, the little angel said with a trembling voice, pulling back Yin Nuoxing's thoughts that had drifted far, far away. When he came back to his senses, he saw a huge, colorful barrier standing in front of him. They were quickly crashing into that barrier, and he could feel a slight pain on his face in advance. Don't you want to think of something? All right, it's too late. After saying that, he felt that it was too late to do anything now. He closed his eyes and hurriedly hugged himself to protect his head so that his face would not be flattened. Yin Nuoxing was panicking and trying to think of a solution. When he heard this, he subconsciously held the red crystal in his hand in front of him and hurriedly propped up an energy barrier. It turned out that seeing oneself crashing into something with little time left would indeed cause one to panic. He clearly had many ways to deal with it. Perhaps he could deal with it or deal with it urgently, but in the end, he chose this seemingly terrible method. However, it worked. When they were rapidly approaching the colorful barrier, the red crystal suddenly burst into an unusually bright light. There was a frightening amount of energy surging within it, which made Yin Nuoxing almost lose his grip on it. Just when he was about to let go of his hand in pain, a big hole suddenly opened in the barrier in front of him, allowing the two people to crash into it. The transmission channel disappeared immediately, and the red crystal with abnormal movements also returned to normal. His eyes crashed into a dark place. Darkness, it was darkness again. Recently, he felt that he had been to too many dark places. The dark void, here, and there was also that place just now. Pushing back for a period of time, there was also the Yongdan realm. It felt like he had not seen the sun for a few days. Even though he was a creature of darkness, he still felt uncomfortable in such darkness. There was a soft body that was not warm in his arms, and a soft little hand touched his arm. Then the soft little hand grabbed his arm, and there was no movement. Yin Nuoshing sighed. He knew that it was that guy, but he did not pay attention to it. He quietly waited for his eyes to adapt to the pure darkness here. After waiting for a few minutes, there was a faint light in front of his eyes. It was just a faint light. With this faint light, he could see some silhouettes in the distance. He could also see the silhouette of the person in his arms. A ray of light appeared in midair, gradually illuminating this space. The little angel flapped its wings lightly, causing the light to converge slightly. This fake angel seemed to have waited for a few minutes before remembering that it could emit light. The ball of light gradually rose, and a part of it fell off, turning into little light particles that floated in this space, causing this space to become brighter and brighter. The scene in the distance also gradually became clearer. Yin Nuoshing raised his head and could see a little more clearly. This was a place that looked like a square. There were 2 rows of pillars that were more than 10 meters in diameter, standing parallel to each other. Those pillars were broken in half, and the broken parts had disappeared. The entire upper half had disappeared. The reason why this place looked like a square was because it was too spacious. In fact, this should be a palace, a temple. Of course, half of it was gone, and only the foundation was left. Oh, and a pile of broken pillars. Here, I remember. It seems to be here, this position, if I remember correctly. Yin Nuoshing felt a little familiar with the things around him. He had seen this place before, and if he remembered correctly, he gently turned around and looked behind him. The things here, this angle, this line of sight. When he turned around, his eyes suddenly widened. What appeared in front of him were several flights of stairs and a tattered throne. This was the place where that scene happened in the memory he obtained. Chapter 1260. Yin Nuoshing had seen this scene in her diary and in those murals. To him, it was history that had happened in the past. It was the curtain call of that great war. He had only seen it twice, and it was just a quick glance. However, it was hard for him to forget it. He felt that in the memories of these dozens of eras, the only thing that would not be forgotten was probably this scene. Starry sky. That's right, this place was under starry sky. The continent was shrouded in a layer of energy barrier, which was all its protection. It was simple and straightforward. Yin Nuoshing and the little angel stood in this broken temple that was as wide as a square. They were stunned. They stared blankly at the broken throne that was only a dozen meters away from them and was only a few steps away. Exquisite and complicated patterns and some strange and mysterious sculptures could be seen on the armrests and edges of the throne. There might have been several kinds of life forms, or they might have recorded some scenes or something. It was difficult to investigate them now. 1/3 of the upper left corner of the throne had already turned into ashes and scattered on the ground. There were many cracks on the entire throne. Yin Nuoshing pulled the little angel a few meters forward and carefully looked at it. She did not dare to step on the steps. It was a throne that flickered with golden light and the colors of the star field. It looked luxurious, but it was restrained and deep. This was probably describing its original appearance. Now, its light had completely dissipated, and its entire body was stained with the grayish-white color of time. A corner of the throne had cracked, and it looked a little miserable. Its former glory had also come to an end with the shattering of this throne. The kami who had once sat on the throne would probably never come back. This place that should have been incomparably glorious, or at least incomparably peaceful, was now all alone in this vanishing star field. It was forever shrouded in endless darkness. Probably no one would remember the beautiful days of this place. Even though this place had become as bad as the world after it was destroyed, Yin Nuoxing could still feel that there was still some special aura left in this place. It was special and calming, as if there was a remnant of divine power left in this place. Perhaps it was because Yin Nuoxing had been close to that realm for a long time. She could feel that aura as soon as she arrived here. This is the place where the first-generation great heavenly deity and the others once resided. The little angels surveyed their surroundings as their golden eyes trembled slightly. This place had become so dilapidated that it was impossible to tell what it used to be. Speaking of which, they'd seen many signs of destruction recently. Was it because too many things that had happened in this world that had been buried? There was nothing left of this place that had been completely destroyed. Perhaps there was nothing worth paying attention to except for the broken throne. However, even the throne was probably nothing worth mentioning. After figuring this out, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but feel a little dejected. Originally, she was hoping to get lucky and see if she could find anything in this space that could solve the problem they urgently needed to solve. In the end, nothing good came out of it. This situation was also within her expectations. Even if there was really nothing, she would just treat it as a vacation. Anyway, it wasn't the first time he used this reason to comfort herself. Originally, when she knew that they had entered this void chasm, she came here with the mentality of admiring the ruins. Apart from that, she did indeed have a little bit of ulterior motives. This was probably something that anyone would have. The two people walked around the dilapidated square of the temple and finally returned to the front of the stairs. Yin Nuoxing crossed her arms and looked at the throne in a daze. Was that Roth's throne? The throne that the heavenly god of destruction had written about, the god of creation that Violet Knight had mentioned. After being in a daze for about a minute, Yin Nuoxing came back to her senses. She saw that there seemed to be some faint traces left behind on the throne that had almost turned gray. Some gold and some red blended together, like the remnants of the dyes that had been splashed and scraped away. They were stuck to the corner of the throne, and also like the marks left behind by something that had dried up. Look at that. Can you see it? At the place where the back of the chair meets the bottom, there's another red and gold mark. The little angel pulled his sleeve and said softly. Yin Nuoxing was slightly stunned. You can see it too. That means that it's not an illusion. She glanced at him and mumbled vaguely. She looked at him from afar. It looks a little like something, a dirty mark. Oh, what are you doing? When it saw Yin Nuoxing slowly walking up the throne, it let out a small cry of surprise and jumped 2 steps to pull him back. Its outstretched hand was a little stiff, and it hesitated for a moment. In this short period of time, he had already walked to the front of the throne. It gritted its teeth and braced itself to walk forward. It could not help but whisper in his ear, "If something really happens, we will not be able to bear the consequences." I'm just... Yin Nuoxing pursed her lips and looked at the mark. She bent down and carefully reached out her hand. I'm just here to take a look. That looks like dried blood, bang. As soon as his finger touched the mark, a thunderclap exploded in the depths of his mind. He suddenly felt dizzy, as if the world had been turned upside down in an instant. The roaring sound was like a high-frequency sound wave that constantly reverberated in his mind, shaking his vision until it became blurry. Long, slender, and blurry lines appeared, making him feel as if he was tied to a meteor hammer and swung with all his strength. Hey, you, $N%. The roaring sound was mixed with the sound of something being destroyed. In the gaps of those sounds, he seemed to hear the nervous voice of the little angel. There were 7 or dozens of echoes. It was so loud that his soul was trembling. It was not until a strange soul power surged into his soul and spirit that he felt that the feeling suddenly disappeared. It was like an earthquake that suddenly disappeared in the middle of it. The ground stopped shaking, the buildings stopped collapsing, and time and space stopped in an instant. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath. He waited until the crazy impact was over before suddenly opening his eyes. His face was covered in sweat. Only then did he realize that he was lying on the ground with his arms and legs spread out. He looked up at a vast and boundless galaxy. The sky was filled with stars that almost lit up the entire starry sky. Ha! Ha! Hiss! Ugh! Yin Nuashing stood up while gasping for air. He subconsciously shook his head that was no longer dizzy. He felt that the stimulation of the dizziness still lingered in his mind. After shaking for a while, he confirmed that he had recovered. What the hell? Hiss! I feel like vomiting. He could not help but complain. He stretched out his hand to touch the side. He thought that he would touch the little angel, but he touched nothing. He staggered and almost fell again. He suddenly turned his head. He did not know when he was left alone in this place. He was stunned for a moment. When he turned around, he saw that he was standing in front of a magnificent temple. The temple's doors were half open. The temple did not have a ceiling. The pillars of the temple, which were tens of meters to tens of meters thick, were shining with divine light. Countless divine runes and complicated patterns were carved on the pillars. They were the only things in this temple. Apart from these pillars, there was nothing else. Rumble. The floor that was glowing with golden light rumbled and shook. It was like an aftershock. The shaking only lasted for a dozen seconds. The brilliance of the divine runes dimmed a little. The colorful barrier that covered the sky flickered slightly. Yin Nuashing reached out to hold on to something beside him to steady himself. When he saw that he was leaning against a pillar of the temple that was shining with divine runes, he was so scared that cold sweat broke out all over his body. Intense flashes of light flashed in the star field, almost tearing a big hole in the void. Endless energy and blazing flames swept through the star field, shooting down the stars as if they were going to pierce through the world. Endless energy storms destroyed the void. The fragments of the void and the fragments of order were like torrential rain pouring down on the entire void. Within the range of his divine soul, every inch of the void was burning with terrifying energy. Oh! Yin Nuashing's face turned pale. He hurriedly withdrew the energy that had spread out. He didn't dare to delve into what those energies were. They were at a level that he couldn't touch at all in his life. The void was filled with thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of auras, each of which could make him feel suffocated. He recalled that he had had such an experience once or twice. In the battle at the end of the Dark Age, every inch and every corner within the range of his perception was filled with the birth and death of energies. The endless energy storms almost turned the 8 elements realm upside down. But now, everything that he sensed was even more terrifying and deadly than that. What the hell happened? Yin Nuashing's hand, which was covering half of his face, clenched tightly, as if he wanted to crush his face. He looked at the shining pillars of this palace, and in his eyes, there seemed to be another scene that was gradually overlapping with this place. That ruin, that dilapidated divine palace plaza. He remembered that there were also 2 rows of such divine palace pillars, but there were even more pillars here. The shape of this palace. All right, the one over there was already completely destroyed. How could he still see its former shape? Buzz, buzz, buzz. A strange sound suddenly sounded between heaven and earth. Along with the sound, all the colors of the colorful barrier in the sky rapidly dimmed. It turned gray and pale, leaving only a brilliant red color. The many pillars of the temple in front of him were the same, leaving only red and some black. The gentle aura faded from this temple, as if everything had withered to the end. Yin Nuashing's eyes widened. He felt a chill in his heart. This temple was no longer gentle, nor was it filled with the vitality of spring like before. Now, there was only an endless, cold aura of destruction. The divine patterns had all turned red. It was a blinding red, like the color of blood. In the center of that red, there was a deep darkness that spread, enough to drive anyone crazy. The entire continent was drowned in the red, as if it had turned into a red star. The gods who were fighting in the distance were stunned when they noticed the changes here. They were shouting something loudly in a language that Yin Nuashing did not understand. One side was shocked, while the other side was wild with joy. He did not understand those words. It was probably the first language of the mythological era. This time, he did not understand at all. There was not even a tenth of it. But now, he had a general idea of what he understood. Combined with the scene before him, he had a general idea. From what he remembered, before the great battle, the heavenly destruction god had been sent away by Los to do something. By the time she had rushed back, the battle was already about to end, and she was the only one left. It was as if the many energies that had filled the entire temple just a moment ago were now only the power of destruction. Did he manage to catch that scene when the heavenly gods of origin had fallen? Then next, Yin shuddered violently. His scalp and face were numb. There seemed to be something that had led him to this step. However, he did not want to pay attention to that at this moment. He suddenly wanted to go to that place and take a look. He looked around randomly. He did not know where he should go or where the throne was, but he still gritted his teeth and charged forward. He did not care whether he was going the right direction or not. He kept running toward the depths of the temple. Boom! He knocked open a heavy door with his shoulder. He was panting heavily. The terrifying aura of destruction that permeated this place made it difficult for him to breathe. The scarlet light that was getting thicker and thicker flooded this place. It seemed to be telling him about the mood of the heavenly destruction god. She was furious and manic. Her aura suppressed the place where the scarlet light shone. Everyone could feel the violent aura that had broken through the limit. The temple seemed to be unable to withstand such a violent aura. Several pillars suddenly broke in half and fell to the ground of the temple. The scarlet barrier did not stop others from coming in. He saw that many people were crossing the barrier in the sky and entering this space. They were all heading in the same direction. He took a deep breath, stepped over the huge pillar fragments, and hurried to catch up. He was very anxious. It seemed that something was urging him. It was he who was urging himself. He was a ghost passing through this time and space. No one would notice him, not even the heavenly gods of origin. However, he could feel the unusual feeling in this time and space. It was so real that he felt like he was there. Damn it. Phew. I'm not going to make it in time. Yun Nuashing's breath became heavier and heavier. The aura of destruction almost pressed him to the ground. He could feel the mood of the owner of this aura, sadness, loss, absent-mindedness, and fury that surpassed everything. He could feel all these. That person even wanted to bury the entire Eight Elements realm with them at this moment. She was fully capable of doing all this. Carelessly wiping away the sweat dripping down from his forehead, Yun Nuashing gasped for air. He placed his palm on the door of the temple and pushed it open. The space in front of him suddenly widened. The walls of the temple disappeared. It was as if he had passed through the temple and arrived at the back garden, the back square. The pillars of the temple were arranged in two parallel rows. The scene in front of him overlapped with the ruins of the temple. The door behind him collapsed as he pushed it open. A series of muffled collapsing sounds came from the temple. However, he was not in the mood to care about that. The scene in front of him, he saw the scene that changed the entire Yuan realm. In front of the splendid throne, there was a lonely and thin figure. Only his back could be seen. He thought that he would see such a scene, but he was wrong. What he saw was only an extremely dazzling scarlet ball of light, as well as countless pitch-black chains that covered his entire field of vision. Those pitch-black chains seemed to want to suppress that scarlet ball of light, as if they wanted to suppress it. A person wearing black and green light armor, holding a golden spear, raised his head to the sky and shouted something. His shout seemed to want to tear the entire sky apart. In the surrounding space, there were figures with 7 divine halos standing above their heads. Several people in a group were controlling those gigantic chains that were so huge that they could lock down stars. A silent confrontation? Suddenly, he heard a weak cry of fear from the mouth of the person holding the black chain. His hand trembled slightly. He seemed to be doing something with his life. The chain in his hand immediately surged with light. Specks of starlight surged on the pitch-black surface. It was as if it had fused with a world of light. It contained the aura of countless living beings. Then let's do this. A voice that sounded like the sound of nature came to his ears. It was cold and emotionless. It made Yin Nuashing feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. He hurriedly raised his head and widened his eyes. The slender figure in the scarlet ball of light stood tall. Balls of light came from the temple behind her, the ground under her feet, and the sky. They gathered towards the scarlet ball of light. Although it was only a glimpse, he definitely saw clearly that those balls of light were not energy. They were God positions, just like those he saw in the true reflection that day. Be buried with me in this world. He heard it clearly. He really heard it this time. His eyes widened. He seemed to remember this scene. The expressions of the people holding the chain and controlling the sea of darkness changed drastically. They seemed to want to retreat from this place. However, the red-black chain that rushed out from the scarlet ball of light kept them in place. An extremely dazzling light burst out from her body like a blood-red star. It was extremely dazzling. Yin Nuoxing walked far away against the light. He passed by those people and came to the front of the throne. Under the scarlet star, he raised his head with all his might. He saw the person holding the golden spear roaring angrily and throwing the spear out. The golden spear penetrated her body with unparalleled power and crashed into the throne beside him. It shattered a third of the throne. The spear also shattered with a sound, leaving behind a pool of golden and red blood. The blood slowly slid down from the top of the throne. Bit by bit, it was engraved on the back of the throne and slowly solidified. The entire space began to shriek. The entire void was mourning and wailing. He heard the crazy roars of the great origin realm. He heard the order shattering. Something in the world was falling apart and was disintegrating on its own. He saw that faint smile of hers. It seemed like she was relieved and helpless. However, he could not see her face clearly at all. Why did he see this smile? Crack! A huge crack pierced through the golden barrier and the purple barrier. It pierced through the land of nothingness and reached the entire great primordial realm. Yin Nuoxing could sense the sound of the great primordial realm collapsing. He raised his head and saw a beam of light that was so bright that it could illuminate the entire great primordial realm. It shone everywhere in the world. Yin Nuoxing watched the eternal light descend and slowly close his eyes. So, that energy is the movement of the great samsara. Chapter 1261. Yin Nuoxing closed his eyes. The light that shone across the entire great primordial realm was the turbulence in the void, the great samsara. He did not expect that the first time he officially saw the great samsara would be under such circumstances. In an illusion of the past, he could not feel anything. Everything descended very quickly and very quietly. That light? Actually, he could faintly see some strange phenomena happening, but they were very blurry. He could not see them clearly, and he could not understand them either. The only thing he could see clearly was that the temple in front of him was slowly collapsing and disappearing like melting snow. The figures holding the black chains also disappeared like a beam of light. Everything collapsed silently. A flame of energy ignited on the continent. It was a change that happened when the light descended. Incomprehensible energy spread to every corner of the star region, towards every part of the void. It was as if there was a blood-red thunderbolt tearing the void apart. The rules began to collapse. Yin Nuoxing could feel that with the continuous eruption of her unprecedentedly powerful energy and the descent of the great samsara, he could not tell whether what was happening at this moment was caused by the great samsara or by her. The only thing he could clearly feel was that the rules of the void began to collapse. The void disintegrated inch by inch, exposing a large area of the void. There was a loud rumble. It only took a few seconds for the brilliant white light to truly erupt. An aura that felt like the creation of the world rushed towards him. He could clearly feel the aura of the beginning of the world. That was probably the only aura left in this world after the great samsara. He could no longer feel it. After the white light descended, he immediately lost consciousness. The feeling of the world spinning struck him again, but it was not intense. It was as if his soul had left his body and was being dragged back into his body by a rope. He did not know what he had experienced during his transmigration. It was as if he had floated in the chaotic void for several years. It was also as if in an instant, that feeling of reality surged into his heart again. Wah! Yin Nuashing cried out. He suddenly turned around and sat up, as if he wanted to spit out the shock that he had just experienced. He even quickly patted his chest and face with his hands. What's wrong? Little Angel was also shocked when she saw his shocked expression. She reached out and patted his head. Yin Nuashing shook his head and came out of the chaotic state of nothingness. He was still affected by the environment he was in, but it was not a big problem. It was like a person who had lost all 5 of his senses suddenly regaining his senses. He looked around and realized that he was still standing in the ruins. He was surrounded by dilapidated temples and countless scars of destruction. Actually, he did not need to look to know that he had returned when he heard its voice. However, what he saw just now made his consciousness a little blurry. There was still a large amount of chaotic information in the depths of his mind. His brain was probably about to be destroyed. Yin Nuashing shook her head for several minutes until the swelling sensation in her head subsided a little. Then, she looked at the throne beside her. The golden and red traces were the only traces left. She had seen the golden-red blood flowing down from the top of the throne in the previous illusion. Now, the large bloodstain was gone. Only this small trace was left. The rest had been washed away by time. However, he had never thought that one day he would know that it would be under such circumstances. He had never thought that it would happen. Why are you in daze? You were the same just now. Why did you suddenly faint? Little Angel's voice pulled him back from his daze. Yin Nuashing was slightly stunned. After a moment, he turned around and saw Little Angel looking at him with a puzzled expression. I fainted. Yin Nuashing rubbed his eyebrows and took a deep breath. He caught a glimpse of the golden red mark from the corner of his eye. He touched it with his hand again. However, this time, nothing abnormal happened. His head did not explode with a bang. It seemed that the illusion was a one-time thing. He patted his face and asked, I fainted just now. How long has it been? Not long. Only 4 or 5 minutes. The expression on Little Angel's face became a little interesting. She looked at him suspiciously and could not help but frown. Are you Feng Ling or Quarter Moon now? Or Yin Nuashing or, This question of yours, aren't these all me? Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes. How was he supposed to answer this question? Little Angel breathed a sigh of relief. This sentence was considered an answer. She thought that this guy had returned to the future a few dozen years later. Then he left someone who should have appeared here to take over the body. Yin Nuashing tilted his head and saw the change in Little Angel's expression. He could roughly guess what Little Angel was thinking. He shrugged and looked left and right. Then he sat down on the throne. However, he only touched the edge of the throne a little. He did not dare to sit down. You! Little Angel looked at him, sitting on the throne in shock. She was shocked and instinctively reached out to pull him up. Yin Nuashing saw this and just grinned. He waved his hand and said, It doesn't matter. I'm just borrowing it to sit for a while. I've just checked. There's no energy left in this place. There's no rule power left. It's fine to sit for a while. After saying that, his expression gradually changed. He whispered, My legs are weak. I was so scared just now. How can I vent my anger if I don't sit for a while? Hearing his childish words, the Little Angel didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She couldn't help but shake her head. Looking carefully at his expression, he was already weak and dispirited, and now he seemed to be even weaker. She didn't know what happened in those short 4 to 5 minutes. Before he woke up, she didn't feel anything wrong with his body. Just now, hearing Little Angel talk about those 5 minutes, Yin Nuashing sighed bitterly. He spread his hands and said, I accidentally saw something. I felt that I shouldn't have seen. I also experienced something that I've never experienced before. Now, I'm physically and mentally exhausted. He slowly told Little Angel about what he saw just now. But halfway through, he felt a slight pain in his head. He still remembered that scene, but when he tried to recall it, he felt a little weak resistance. It was a resistance born from his soul. It was a slight feeling of discomfort. It was just a weak feeling that did not affect him as he spoke. The Little Angel's pretty face froze in shock when she heard his words. She opened her mouth, but didn't know what to say. The great Samsara, and when the god of destruction fell, when the origin heavenly gods fell at that time, then those golden red seals, aren't they the god's blood of the god of destruction? From the last scene, it should be correct. It's probably because it's her god's blood. The last scene, it's a little messy. I can't even speak clearly. As Yin Nuashing spoke, he felt that he was talking nonsense. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. After he sorted out his words, he said, "At that time, she was very remorseful. She probably left some lingering thoughts or something else. Those things entangled her body, and at the same time, they were branded in her god's blood. Perhaps because of this, she left behind a phantom that allowed me to know what happened at that time. It was also because of this incident that some of his previous doubts were resolved. Not only did he see it with his eyes, but he also felt it with his senses. In addition to the information he had compiled and pieced together over the years, he finally understood. The great samsara, this era is known as the void turbulence. It's the void turbulence that happened 11 years ago and destroyed the 8 elements realm. If I'm not mistaken, it should have affected the entire Great Origin realm. That void turbulence wiped out 90% of the 8 elements realm, almost all of the lives there. It restored the void to its most primitive state, which is the state of nothingness before the void was born. I know this. You've told me many times that you're investigating the void turbulence. Not long ago, She nodded. Halfway through her sentence, she saw him wave his hand and stopped. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath and said, "That was actually caused by the god of destruction himself." When she finished speaking, the air instantly froze. He looked up and saw that her entire body was stiff and even her feathers were standing up. It was as if she had been shocked by too much information and turned into a stone statue. That's what happened. That's what happened. I didn't tell you all at once because I didn't know how to explain it. After thinking about it for a long time, I felt that it would be better to just say it directly. That's right. Just as you and I didn't expect, that spatial turbulence was caused by the heavenly destruction god himself. He probably used this method because he had no other choice. After all, there were so many enemies. Yin Nuashing sighed. Air. Well, it's not completely unacceptable. She put on an expression that was difficult to tell whether she was laughing or crying. She shook her head and ran her jade-like hands through her silver-white hair. After a while, she took a deep breath and said, "Then what about the great samsara after that? The heavenly origin god is no longer here. So what's going on?" "Well, it's the one I told you about not long ago. When I went to the scene this time, I clearly sensed something. When the heavenly origin god and the others fell, the temple changed. At that time, I sensed that there were some loopholes in the laws of the void. It was because of their fall that the void lost something. The great samsara is a phenomenon caused by the loss of the laws of the void due to the fall of the heavenly origin god." Yin Nuashing tilted her head and said, "Actually, I don't think that what I said before is wrong. It's just that I think it's more likely that she caused the void turbulence and blew something up, which affected something and caused the great samsara after that." The little angel laughed bitterly. "What was it?" "For more specific details, I can only ask them. After all, this is just a rough result of my years of investigation. I don't expect to find a more accurate answer." Yin Nuashing let out a long breath and turned to look at the bloodstain again. She was slightly stunned. She didn't know when, but the last bloodstain had disappeared. It sounds quite complicated, but it's already a fact. There's no point in worrying about it. Compared to investigating the origins and reasons, it's far more useful to know how to survive the great samsara. She shrugged and raised her wings slightly. Then, her golden eyes fell on his hand. She slowly grabbed his hand and said, "Compared to that, I'm more concerned about this. How did you get it?" Yin Nuashing's eyes fell on his hand, and his cheeks twitched. He saw that there was a strange mark on the back of his right hand, a mark that was a mixture of gold and red. It was a mark. He sensed it slightly and didn't feel anything. It seemed like it was just a tattoo. And that mark, why did it look so similar to he couldn't remember at the moment? As for how he got it, he could roughly guess, it seems like I got when I touched that bloodstain just now." Yin Nuashing turned it over and looked at it for a while. "I just happened to touch it with this hand. Maybe it doesn't mean anything special. I didn't have this thing on me in the future. It will probably disappear after a while." "What do you mean by after a while?" Her cheeks twitched slightly. "This is the bloodstain of the origin heavenly god. That heavenly god of destruction. You touched it and even got it. Do you really think it will disappear after a while?" Maybe. Yin Nuashing's face stiffened. Looking at her incomparably serious expression, he couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "It won't. It doesn't matter. Let's wait until something happens. It's not the first time I've touched it. Anyway, with my temper, I won't be surprised if something bad happens. I'm glad that this is the mark of the origin heavenly god. If it was some other strange god who left some strange mark on me, I would have to find out what it was even if I had to destroy myself." She laughed bitterly. Although the name of the origin heavenly god sounded very reassuring, they had all fallen for a long time. Touching a mark or something like that at this time really made her feel uneasy. However, since he didn't seem to care, there was nothing for her to worry about. This guy's life was much tougher than a cockroach's. He had died tens of billions of times and reincarnated countless times. Since he could still leave his mark in this world after all, there was probably nothing that could trouble him. Although he was smiling, Yin Nuashing tried his best to clearly imprint everything he saw in the illusion in his mind. Then, he carefully recalled whether his right hand had touched something that it should not have touched. Saying that it had been stained with blood was just a brainless answer. In fact, he was not very sure himself. It was possible that he had touched something in the illusion. Even if it was just an illusion, it was still the temple of the god of origin. Even if he had crossed time and left something behind because he had touched something, it was still allowed by the rules. Anyway, if something had appeared on his body for no reason, he had long been creeped out. He thought carefully. His hand seemed to have touched something. It was the pillars of the temple, a few doors, and even the ground. When a spear exploded, he even held onto the throne in order to stabilize himself. He held onto the throne. He seemed to have thought of something, and his face suddenly turned pale. It was very likely that the blood of the origin heavenly god had splashed onto him. From his angle and standing position, he was afraid. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but take off his clothes. The little angel was so shocked that her pretty face turned red. She hurriedly covered her eyes with her wings and said angrily, "What are you doing?" Then, she was stunned. She widened her eyes in horror. On his snow-white back, there was a large golden red mark. It was a complete mark, and it was even clearer than the one on the back of his right hand. Listening to her silence, he could also think of something. He couldn't help but sigh. It's over. Another disaster. Chapter 1262. There were things that were not allowed in the world. It was like going against the current of the sea and go to the past to change something. In the end, it was just a fantasy. Those who had the ability were not allowed to do such things, but those who did not have the ability could do it. However, both of them could not fulfill all the conditions, and in the end, they could not achieve that goal. However, it was not difficult for the past to affect the future. It was also not difficult for the gods of origin who had appeared in the void since the beginning of the great Yuan realm. What he was trying to say was that although he had come into contact with the heavenly god in that illusion was a real scene to him. There was no reason for it. Furthermore, it was because it was the heavenly god of origin. These four words could destroy everything that was impossible, and everything was possible. Then he suffered. Well, although he did not know whether he suffered or not, he was inexplicably left with some kind of mark on his body. No matter how he thought about it, it was not a very good thing. However, he was not particularly worried. After all, the later generations did not have such things. Perhaps these strange origin marks would be destroyed along with the destruction of his body. The worst thing that could happen to him in this dream was that he would just die and then wake up from his dream. By the way, he had just thought of the origin mark a few seconds ago. It was a mark left by the gods of origin. It was simple and straightforward. However, When he thought of this mark, he could not help but think of that person. In the end, in that ball of red light, there was a stunning smile. It really made his hair stand on end, because he felt that smile and the gaze that fell on him for a moment. That gaze stared at him for 4 or 5 seconds until he could not stand it and ran to the throne. Was it an illusion? Perhaps under other circumstances, he would have explained it this way. However, in that situation, he was sure that the god of destruction was staring at him. Across countless years, across the void, he even felt that she was not looking at Feng Ling, but him, Yin Nuoxing. She saw him running towards her and then running to the throne to hide. In short, he just felt a chill run down his spine. That exchange of glances from more than 11 years away made his heart almost stop beating. Why are you daydreaming? The little angel covered his half-naked body with her wings. Her fair face was still slightly red. When Yin Nuoxing heard the sound, she let out a soft before slowly putting on her clothes. It spread its wings and watched as the golden red, divine blood mark disappeared from its eyes. Its eyes flickered slightly. Are you all right now? Do you feel that something is wrong? Nothing special. Yin Nuoxing responded casually and then quickly checked her body. After about 4 to 5 minutes, she nodded. Yes, I don't feel anything wrong. I'm tired as usual. My body's condition didn't change after the god's blood was spilled on me. He tried to recall the illusion again. His head was still a little swollen, but it was not as serious as before. His brain seemed to be able to handle the illusion that transcended reality. He shrugged and said, "That's about it. There shouldn't be anything else that needs to be that thing. It can't be that my body gave him. Who knows about you?" It rolled its eyes in annoyance. "Anyway, I won't be surprised if you have any strange things on you. If I have to express my surprise every time, I won't be able to take it. Let's go back to the original question." She waved her hand and touched her wings. "You haven't forgotten why we're here, have you?" "Of course not." Yin Nuoxing spread her hands. She was here to set up the time node. But when she heard that the great void fisher might have some influence, she took the risk to come in. Well, she did not think of a solution when she came in. That frozen sea of time. Hearing his sigh, she rolled her eyes and said cautiously, "Actually, before we came to the great void fisher, before we opened the passage to the great void fisher in the sea of time, I saw the sea of crystal shattering." "Shattering?" Yin Nuoxing murmured. "What's the situation when it shatters? Could it be that the frozen sea of time will return to its original state?" "That I don't know." She shrugged and stuck out her tongue. Yin Nuoxing turned around and looked at the throne. It stood there quietly and did not move. From that moment on, it did not move, and it would not move in the future. It had already stopped when the heavenly gods of origin fell. All time had stopped on that day. Just like the frozen sea of time, it was fixed in that time and remained silent to all the movements of the outside world. It did not react at all. I suddenly remembered something. The little angel suddenly called out softly, interrupting Yin Nuoxing's thoughts. He turned around and cast a puzzled look at her. That heavenly god of destruction died 11 years ago, right? Then, didn't she leave a diary in the 61st era? She was in the mortal realm at that time. Does that mean she has come back to life? Yin Nuoxing thought for a moment and shook her head. Perhaps she will return at the beginning of the next era. Compared to the other heavenly gods of origin who had given up on reincarnation and entered the endless mortal realm, well, as far as I know, she's a person who is bound by obsession like me. She struggles and stubbornly lives in this world for the sake of what she wanted to do back then before she died. She seems to want revenge, and I am the same. She wants to find an existence that is equal to her, and I am looking for an existence that is a level higher than myself, an existence that is of the same origin as me. From this point of view, the two of you are really alike. It tiptoed in a circle on the spot and said, stubbornly, wanting to finish the unfinished business. The humiliation and sufferings of the past. Even if it causes one to sink into the cycle of eternal damnation, one still has to bear with it and wait for the next life. In the countless next lives, one will give everything to destruction. Yin Nuashing remained silent. Her eyelids drooped slightly, and she continued as if she did not see anything. Huh. From his point of view, it really does seem like she has chosen you. With the heavenly god of Origin's power, she could have seen 11 or even dozens of eras later. Look, you came here, bathed in her divine blood, took the core of her scepter, and that's impossible. Yin Nuashing turned around and said flatly, "Don't forget that the me who is here now is the me of the 139th era. The one who should have appeared here was Feng Ling, and what you saw was only Feng Ling. Is that so?" She smiled, and a deep color appeared in her golden eyes. Just as Yin Nuashing could not stand her gaze any longer, she withdrew her gaze and turned around. "Well, let's not talk about this for now. Let's talk about the matter at hand." Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes and sighed. To solve this problem, the key is still in the sea of time. If we don't solve the stagnation in the sea of time, we won't be able to find the hole in the sea of time, and we won't be able to place the time node. "I think you're still thinking too much." She grinned. "Let's think about how to get out of here." Yin Nuashing's expression changed, and she covered her face with a bitter smile. She had really forgotten about this matter, the great void fissure. According to her, they were lucky enough to be thrown in here by the energy of the sea of time. However, if they really wanted to get out, they would have to face the divine destructive storm again. It was probably the border of the great void fissure, which was also the planetary sector that the heavenly god of destruction had destroyed the most with her own energy. The entire piece had been blown out of the void and was now drifting toward the depths of the void. Sure enough, this was the main problem. They were wrapped in the energy of the sea of time when they came in. So how were they going to get out? She did not think that there would be two lucky chances. Did she really think that this was a public toilet where she could come and go as she pleased? After wandering around this broken continent for a while, she floated up and looked at the panoramic view. Now, the barrier could not stop them. They could really come and go as they pleased. However, leaving this broken continent and leaving the great void fissure were two completely different concepts. "Why don't we try using that fragment?" she said softly. "All right, I forgot about that." Yin Nuashing clapped her palms together and hurriedly took out the black iron piece from the pendant. Then, the abnormality appeared at this moment. Buzz! The moment the black iron piece came out and touched his palms, the golden red mark on his body lit up with an unusually bright light. The little angel was shocked when she saw this scene. Before she could examine it carefully, a huge divine power pushed her away. Yin Nuashing only felt that his heart had stopped beating. A shadow with a huge light appeared behind him. The light made him feel that the whole world had dimmed a little. He did not dare to look back. He only felt that there was an extremely terrifying existence behind him. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. That phantom! He did not need to guess to know who it was. She bent down, stretched out her slender hand, and stroked the fragment in his palm along his arm. He could still feel the warmth of the fragment. It was so real that it did not feel like a shadow. The little angel, who was pushed a few meters away, saw this scene and did not dare to breathe loudly. She could see the panoramic view from here, but the face of the shadow was very blurry and could not be seen clearly. However, she noticed that Yin Nuashing's face was covered in cold sweat and his whole body was trembling. She looked to the right and could only see that person's long hair fell on his shoulders. Anyway, he looked like he was about to collapse from fright. A soft whisper came into his ears. He couldn't understand. That was nonsense. Since he came into this space and went to the illusion, he didn't understand much. After the voice sounded, Yin Nuashing was surprised to find that the golden red marks on his body were flowing on his body, along his shoulders and arms, all the way to the black iron plate. The black patch glowed with golden red light, flashing, and a mark appeared, then dimmed. "You are..." Yin Nuashing's hair stood on end. If he had faith, he would have prayed hundreds of thousands of times by now. He heard her voice again. It was clear and melodious, just like the sound of nature. However, he was not in the mood to listen to that voice. Every time they appeared, he felt like he was under a spell and could not move. That was the only sentence that he could hear clearly. He only heard two words. That phantom seemed to have lost its last bit of strength and slowly disappeared. The light gradually dimmed and disappeared without a trace. He heaved a sigh of relief. His entire body seemed to have been drained of energy as he collapsed to the ground. The metal piece in his hand fell to the side and smashed onto a rock on the ground. The mark that had disappeared reappeared and slowly opened up a 10-meter-wide portal about a foot above the ground. It reflected the void outside. The little angel hurriedly ran over and squatted down, carefully checking on his condition. Other than the golden red marks that had faded away from his body, there was nothing else wrong with him. The only other thing was that he was suffering from heart failure. He had been frightened by himself. He did not understand why the heavenly gods of origin could scare him half to death every time they appeared. Now that he had been in close contact with them, he was so scared that he collapsed. Really? Isn't it just a shadow? Do you have to be so scared? She did not know whether to laugh or cry. She used some strength to help him up. Aren't you the observer of the realm of the gods? Didn't you say that the entire void is... Oh, now that there's an underworld in the void, that sentence doesn't work anymore? Anyway, that's what you meant. Why are you so scared by a stupid shadow? You're asking me. Yin Nuashing trembled as he looked at the little angel. He then carefully looked behind him and found that there was nothing behind him. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. How would I know? My body became like that, as if it was a conditioned reflex. I can't even control it. How would I know what's going on? She did not know whether to laugh or cry as she shook her head. She supported him and slowly walked towards the portal opened by the metal piece. She picked up the metal piece and put it into his pendant. Although I don't know what happened, but the portal is open. We can probably get out now. Let's forget about what happened today. We still have things to do in the real world in our own dimension. Okay, Yin Nuashing replied weakly. He was a little unsteady as he was supported by the little angel as he walked towards the portal. Before he left, he looked back at the shattered continent. There were many broken pieces floating around the edge of the continent like floating islands. It was cold and dead. After this, he reckoned that no one would come here for a while. Why do I care about this? He smiled bitterly and waved his hand. He then let the little angel help him out of the portal. Chapter 1263. An inconspicuous crack slowly opened in the void. Two figures supported each other as they slowly walked out of it. When they walked out of the crack and into the void, the crack slowly closed again. There was no divine destruction storm, nor was there any movement. It was so calm that it was as if they had opened a door and walked out, then closed the door behind them. It was simple and straightforward. It was far less complicated and troublesome than when they had first entered. After coming out of the void crack, Yin Nuashing first threw the Book of Epics out. He glanced at the time of the Yuan realm in it and could not help but be stunned. It had only been 13 hours since they fell into the Sea of Time, but their actual senses and many mistakes had made them feel that more than 10 days had passed. They could not take out the Book of Epics in the void crack, so they could not confirm it. Now that they had confirmed it, they could truly feel the difference in time. 13 hours. The eyes of the little angel shrank slightly. He was a little surprised, but he soon calmed down. It's not that I can't understand it, but when I really confirmed it, I still felt that it was a little unbelievable. In my senses, I even thought that more than 10 days had passed. Yin Nuashing nodded. That difficult time, well, it was not just because it was difficult to endure, but because they really felt that a long time had passed, but only 13 hours had passed in the void crack. It seemed that the rule of time in the void crack was different from the outside world. That made sense. The Sea of Time had been frozen. So how could it be the same as the void crack in the void crack? After creating a stable space in the void, Yin Nuashing slumped down to rest. After the little angel settled him down, he glanced at the Sea of Time. He hesitated for a moment. He did not really see the situation inside, so he carefully opened a crack in the void crack. The barrier that was glowing with golden light was cut open, and he stuck his head out to take a look inside. A moment later, he screamed and quickly flew back to Yin Nuashing's side. He grabbed his hand and said, "The Sea of Time has recovered." At this moment, Yin Nuashing was a little absent-minded because of excessive fatigue. It could not respond for a long time. It did not know what it was referring to when it said that it had recovered. When it was so anxious that it could not speak and was about to pull Yin Nuashing to let him take a look, the former suddenly regained his senses and sat up a little. That sea of time crystals has recovered. How has it recovered? Is it just the appearance, or has it recovered the rule of time as well? The flow of the sea of time is normal, but the sea of time in this area is unusually calm. I don't know if it is because it has just broken free from that state, but now it seems to be a little lazy. It is too lazy to flow, too lazy to let time flow. The little angel still pulled Yin Nuashing to the gap in the time barrier. He pointed his finger inside. Yin Nuashing looked over, and the frozen sea of time was gone. It was no longer a place full of time crystals. This place was a flowing dark yellow sea of time. It was too calm. It was exactly as he said. It was too calm. There were only faint ripples on the surface of the sea of time from time to time. Far away, farther away, and even deeper in the time barrier, the sea of time was still calm. It was not until far away that the sea of time in some places showed more restless surging. Oh, it is not only the sea of time in this place that has become calm. Yin Nuashing moved his head out of the crack and looked at it with a strange expression. He grinned and said, "A large area of the sea of time has become unusually calm. At least it has spread to the extent of an entire plane or even two planes." It was slightly stunned and looked inside carefully. Indeed, it saw that the sea of time in the distance had become very calm. It was like a rare day when there was no wind. The surface of the sea was calm and sparkling. If there was a ship drifting in this golden sea, it would also be very calm. It was so calm that it could be fixed in place without making any movements. Why is it like this? Previously, they had set up time nodes along the way, so they knew what the sea of time looked like. It was definitely not as calm as it was now. Except for those holes in the sea of time and a small circle around it, the sea of time was quite lively. At any time, there would be huge waves that were more than 10,000 feet or 1,000,000 feet rolling up, as if they were going to smash everything that existed in it. Yin Nuashing twirled a finger around his hanging hair and muttered, "Perhaps it is because of this space." Previously, when we learned that the great void crack drifted from the center of the void all the way to the outer edge, we found its traces and tracks along the way. The sea of time in those places would be unusually chaotic, and the rules would be turbulent. The closer we get to this place, the more violent the sea of time would be. And when it reaches a critical point, the sea of time would suddenly become calm, as if it had been frozen. No, it would be frozen slowly, bit by bit, until the place where this space appeared. This is the state where the sea of time is completely frozen. It sorted out this paragraph and roughly understood what he was trying to say. When the great void crack drifted from the center of the void to the outer edge and the depths of the void, it affected the space along the way. It might have been frozen at the beginning, and when it left, it slowly thawed. But this was not all. The energy left behind by it had caused a weak influence on the balance, so they saw the turbulent appearance of the sea of time. Perhaps that was not its true appearance. The real sea of time was very, very calm. After that, he added something which was roughly the same as what it had sorted out. Then he said, "Now that we have come out of the great void crack, could it be that we have touched something inside? This completely frozen time has returned to normal. And by the way, its power that affected other places has begun to dissipate." The little angel listened and nodded slightly. That made sense. However, she asked, could it be that there's something hidden in that space? And today, could it be that we accidentally did that thing? Yin Nuashing's body trembled violently. He turned his neck and looked at it with a creaking sound. His face was full of cold sweat. What could it be? He had touched a lot of things inside. For example, the throne, the broken pillar, the pillar in the illusion that really existed, the temple square, and her blood. He used the fragments to open the door. It couldn't be that the door's problem, right? He also felt that the door's appearance was a little too forced. If he really wanted to say something, it was actually related to him. Then because he touched something, the eternal stagnation of this space was lifted, So the Sea of Time was thawed. It was because they came and touched something. It was scary just thinking about it. He did not dare to continue thinking about it. He quickly shook his head and threw those scary thoughts to the back of his head. Regardless of those nonsensical thoughts, there was an unchanging reality at the moment. This Sea of Time was normal and very stable. There was a hole in the Sea of Time not far from the location of the crack that had opened. When he thought about it, he felt that it was too coincidental. Well, it was better not to think about it. Yin Nuoxing waved his hand and walked into the Sea of Time again. When it saw him walk in, its feathers stood up in fright. It looked reluctant, but when it saw him walk in and was about to get busy, it gritted its teeth and followed him in. In fact, it was a little afraid of the experience of being trapped in the Sea of Time at that time. It was a little traumatized. It would want to be trapped again for no reason. It did not even want to think about it. Cautiously, it walked to his side and watched him start to work with a serious face. It could not help but sigh and step back a little. The divine power flowed around its body to guard against any possible situation. It looked at the depths of the Sea of Time with its eyes. It was indeed much calmer. It could feel a little bit of a situation. There was some kind of weak energy based on the condition that the balance was broken. It triggered some kind of repair recovery. It was like there was a stone in the middle of the river that divided the river into left and right. Although the river would reunite not far away, it was a fact that the stone had blocked the flow of the river. Now, it felt like the river had lost its obstruction, and there was a force that was slowly getting rid of the stone. It's probably because we've triggered something that freed this space from its eternal stagnation. It suddenly said, "Look, the Sea of Time is so calm now. Even the place where we set the time node before, the Sea of Time in that place has stopped surging." Yin Nuoxing's shoulders twitched slightly. He nodded and did not say anything. He continued to focus on setting the time node. Far away, on the other side of the void, Hui, who had just finished a great battle, was commanding people to repair the broken void and clean up the mess. He also planned to set the time node according to the original plan. Who knew if there were other people monitoring this void? Anyway, it was not a problem to set another time node. It was not a problem to set the time node in the correct hole in the Sea of Time. Lord Qing, the team that I asked you to set up before can be sent to the field. Now that the void is almost repaired, there will no longer be energy fluctuations affecting the Sea of Time. Let them rest assured. We will be watching this place. At the end of his command, Hui waved his hand to call the Grand Lord of the Green Clan over and whispered to him. When the kid yawned and dragged his tired body to the side, Hui was about to sit down on the ground. Suddenly, his body trembled. He raised his head calmly and looked around as if he was examining the battlefield. His eyes narrowed slightly, and some energy poured into his eyes. His line of sight turned into the golden Sea of Time in a flash. The golden sea was calm, and there was nothing. There were some bright white spots on the sparkling golden sea. It was so bright that it was dazzling, like the reflection of the sun on the sea. The Sea of Time is calm. He was slightly stunned. For millions of years, they had been like a fisherman living by the sea all year round. They had observed the situation in the world. The situation in the Sea of Time could not be missed. It was too violent, far beyond the limits of normal rules. They could not find out what was wrong between the Sea of Time and the rules of the void. Then, it suddenly calmed down today. The abnormal violent state calmed down without any process. Inconceivable. However, it was not completely unimaginable, and it was not necessarily untraceable. Partner, did you do something over there? I saw that the Sea of Time calmed down all of a sudden. We sent a message to Yin Nuoxing, who was far away in another void in the center of the void. Yin Nuoxing was maintaining the time node. When she heard the words, her palm trembled slightly, and she almost lost control. She was in a hurry to maintain the stability. The movement was so big that the little angel hurriedly came over to help restore the balance of the time node that had gathered halfway. The two pairs of eyes looked at each other, and the pair of golden eyes looked at him with a little puzzlement. Yin Nuoxing scratched her head and laughed dryly. After stabilizing the time node, she found Huey's soul seed. Ah, something did happen. You also observed that the sea of time calmed down. That may not be a coincidence. Maybe I had to do something? Huh. Huey's face was blank and puzzled. Yin Nuashing scratched her head and sighed. She tried to condense the situation into 2 or 3 paragraphs. She deliberated and said, but the more she said, the more she said. She told him about 80% of the situation. Anyway, when we came out of the void fissure, we saw that the sea of time calmed down. I also suspected that it was because of our actions that broke the frozen state. When we learned about the frozen state of the void fissure, I felt that it was very likely to be the culprit that affected the sea of time. Now that it has broken free from the state of eternal stagnation, so the entire sea of time has returned to normal. It seems to be explainable. Oh, huh. Huey's dumbfounded expression changed and finally settled on a half-confused and half-understanding situation. That's probably it. Partner, are you okay? For the time being, I'm fine. I didn't encounter anything special. I just went around inside. But you guys went through a divine destruction storm. Even if you were wrapped in the energy of the sea of time, it may reduce the damage, but that's a divine destruction storm. Let me check it for you when we get back. Hui frowned and said worriedly, I'm fine with it. If you're worried, you can check it. I don't think there should be any problem. Perhaps because he knew that he had taken the risk of running to a terrifying place, he was not very reassured, so he reluctantly agreed. There was a good saying, the one who understands you the most is not necessarily yourself. In the same situation, perhaps other people's perspectives could provide a different view. Okay, I'm worried about other things. Let's talk about it when you come back. Hui smiled and said something vague. Yin Nuashing did not hear it very clearly. She could not help but ask, what did you say? Are you worried that the peace in the sea of time will be noticed by others? Yin Nuashing smiled. Don't worry. There shouldn't be anyone in this world who would explore so deep into the sea of time. The only ones who would be bored enough to explore this sea over and over again are you and me. Hui grinned and seemed to be right. Okay, then you can focus on your time node. We'll talk about the rest when we get back. By the way, our operation here is very smooth. They were easily fooled. When you two went into that dangerous place for a date, we were fighting in full swing. It's still okay. Yin Nuashing shook her head helplessly. There's no danger, right? Are the losses serious? Let me know if you need anything. Although I'm a little weak now, I can still help with a little bit of strength. It's not that dangerous. It's just, Hui frowned. Partner, you told me about the divine destruction power last time, right? Yes. What's wrong? Yin Nuashing was puzzled. If you don't put it in order, the first is your nirvana element. The second is the abyssal death mist of the underworld, also called the divine destruction mist by them. The third is the power we saw that day, the power used by the guardian of the altar world, right? Hui murmured to himself. Yes. What's wrong? Yin Nuashing frowned. She had a bad feeling. What's wrong? I can't tell what's wrong. Hui sighed. Yin Nuashing could see Huey's frown across the void. Say, how many types of divine destruction power are there in this world? How many? How would I know? Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes. The bad feeling in her heart grew stronger and stronger. Hui, did you discover something? Hurry up and say it. Hui grunted in a low voice. Then he said faintly, when you two went in, we were in the middle of a fierce battle. Suddenly, we were ambushed twice. If everyone present didn't sense wrongly, those were two different types of not exactly the same energy. But they were both a little similar to our divine destruction power, right? Yin Nuashing's cheeks twitched. Hui nodded. I suspect that those were the other two types of divine destruction power. Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes. She twitched and almost fell headfirst into the sea of time. Chapter 1264. What kind of energy was the power of God's destruction? This was a question that the Yunhua star had not been able to figure out for the time being. Obviously, there was no way to explore it. This name came from the mouth of that person in the underworld. Therefore, other than tracing the time back to the mythological era, there was probably no way to find the so-called truth. What he knew now was that there were subtle similarities between the divine destruction powers, but they did not resonate with each other. They came from the same source, but they did not come from the same source. As for which source it referred to, that was even more unclear. As for the difference in strength, Yin Nuashing could not tell. After all, he was the only one in this world who had the element of destruction, and the abyssal death shroud had already filled the entire void. How could they compare? Oh, but it seemed that the weakest one was the guardian of the altar world that they had seen so far. The divine destruction power that the little girl wielded was pitifully weak. Even so, it was a divine destruction power, an energy that transcended order, rules, and balance. Why don't you take a rest? Yin Nuashing snapped out his thoughts when he heard the voice beside his ear and felt a faint push on his shoulder. He tilted his head slightly and saw that it was looking at him worriedly. He paused for a moment. I'm fine. What'd be wrong? I just had a few words with Hui. I feel a little uneasy. Uneasy? It paused slightly. Yeah. Yin Nuashing nodded. As he maintained the time node, he spared a little bit of his attention to repeat what Hui had just told him. He then sighed. The divine destruction power. I've never heard of it. In all the ancient books that I've seen that involve the mythological era, other than the pure first type of divine language that I couldn't understand, there was no information related to these 4 words that I could understand. Seriously, I'm so annoyed. Looking at him scratching his head anxiously, the little angel was also very puzzled. The power of divine destruction was more like a kind of special energy that was born when the balance of the world collapsed. Based on the loopholes and the rules of the void, it was a kind of special energy that destroyed the balance and order of the world. Although it was a form of energy that was carried by some people, the destructive characteristics did not disappear just like that. It could even affect the hosts themselves, just like the crescent moon and Yunua planet in the future. Under the influence of that energy, they had become a kind of life form that was neither human nor ghost, and everything about them was inclined towards chaos at that thought. It subconsciously said some special energy that was left after the world was created. What do you think? Yin Nuashing was a little stunned and did not react for a long time. What is special? Oh, you mean the divine destruction power? Why do you say that? You see, in the future, your life form has been distorted into chaos. The places that were destroyed by the divine destruction power will also be distorted into chaos, a place without any rules or order to speak of. Don't they have something in common? It said as it twirled its slender fingers. Yin Nuashing frowned. It existed in the nothingness before the Yuan realm was born, and it was left behind after the world was created. It was not used, so it was not recognized by the rules of this world. It was not impossible to think of it this way, it seemed, but it felt that something was not right, and it was a little forced to say it. The 2 people standing in the sea of time fell silent. One of them frowned and reached out to control the time node in front of them, while the other looked at the former with some hope, the wings on its back flapping from time to time. Even when the time node was ready, Yin Nuashing did not give any answer and only shook its head. Then it carefully stuffed the time node into the hole in the sea of time below. When it saw the phenomenon of energy connection between the two, it clapped its hands and opened a passage to the main world. It waved at the little angel and took the lead to walk out. He looked like he did not know how to answer, and it looked like he could not say anything, which made it feel a little helpless. These trivial matters involved many aspects, and it would not be easy to get to the bottom of it. After a while, it shook its head. What was the point of it thinking about these things? It was useless even if it thought about it. It did not understand that energy as much as he did, so it would leave it to him to figure out. It would just chatter at the side and occasionally cause trouble. Why don't we tell everyone about these things and let the people of the void discuss it? Maybe it will be solved after a brainstorming session. The words were thrown out without thinking, and Yin Nuashing, who was walking in front, was so shocked that it almost went into shock. Yin Nuashing sighed. If you want the entire void to become chaotic because of this, it is not impossible to tell. The observer of the divine realm controls a type of divine destruction power, which is of the same origin as the death mist of the abyss. It is a divine destruction power of the same origin as the death mist of the abyss. Those who have the intention will be involved in this aspect. Although my identity has not been announced, the meaning is that people's hearts cannot be controlled. Who knows if there will be people who are too bored to talk about these things? The consequences of these things are unpredictable, and in this era of war, I think it will cause even more chaos, and the void might even be divided into 2 or 3 factions. If I have to show up at this time, I might even be pushed out of the Order faction. How troublesome. It sighed and spread its hands helplessly. Anyway, it was just a casual suggestion, and it did not think that the plan would really work. Before the results came out, it might usher in an even greater disaster. It was just a casual suggestion, but someone really thought about it. Yin Nuoxing could not help but let his imagination run wild again. Those 4 words were spinning around in his mind, and it was like a spell that was repeated thousands of times until he decided to give up thinking, and only then did his brain avoid the danger of being damaged due to overworking. After solving the huge problem left behind by history, the Great Void Fissure, the subsequent time nodes were so smooth that they did not have to worry about the sudden counterattack of the Sea of Time. However, the 2 who solved the problem of the Stinkstone of history were obviously in a state of confusion, and there was also a little fear in their hearts. They felt that they had walked around that place, and it was as if they had toured the underworld. Perhaps the more direct feeling was more exaggerated than that. After all, that place was called the Void Graveyard, the place where the first generation of great gods fell, and also the place that bore the brunt of the void turbulence. After setting up the remaining 2 time nodes, Yin Nuoxing and the little angel quickly returned to the realm of the gods. Perhaps because it was really uneasy and paranoid, Yin Nuoxing opened the protection of the Pillar of Creation, which had been closed for a long time, and set up tens of thousands of frighteningly high-level defenses within 100 miles of its residence. It felt that even the primeval god of the beginning would have a hard time if he wanted to break in. Those defenses were all linked to the realm of the gods itself, and to break those defenses, it was equivalent to going against the entire realm of the gods. He was not done with his work so quickly, and with the idea that he had to complete the act, he intended to take his men and really set up the time nodes. It was not until 3 days had passed in the realm of the gods that he returned. When the little angel, who had nothing to do like a salted fish, saw Hui running back with a face full of dirt and plunging into the lake, it could not help but be stunned. "Where did you go? Why are you in such a mess?" Hui jumped into the lake and washed his face without even taking off his clothes. Then he climbed out of the lake with his whole body wet. His expression was a little gloomy and unhappy. "We were ambushed. We overdid the acting. Out of the original 12 time points, when we arranged for the 10th, we encountered unprecedented pressure. At least we could confirm that it was the people from the 12 forces who intercepted us. After being beaten up, we came back." Although it was just a simple explanation, the actual situation was certainly not that simple, or he would not have put on such a gloomy face. Seems like there are quite a lot of people who are against this. Is this internal strife? It sighed softly. The human heart was really complicated. Internal strife? I don't think so. After all, I don't know any of those people. They probably did not join the Void Battlefront, and have never shown their faces in places that we know of. I'm talking about the Order faction. Well, then it's internal strife. Hui sat on the grass with a bitter smile. Logically speaking, I did not tell them the final goal and the detailed purpose, so there should be no reason for them to see through it. There's no need for that. If there's really a reason for those people, it's probably because you've touched something of theirs. For example, they've really hooked up with the underworld, or they're originally from the underworld, and what you're doing is used to defend against the underworld. It's much simpler to think of it this way. We pondered for a while, and seriously thought for a while. Seems to make sense. Let's not talk about this. Where's Maple? I have something to ask him. He had a nightmare. It stretched and pointed inside the building with its wing. He's had nightmares for a few days. After coming back from the Great Void Rift, he's been restless. In my memory, he shouldn't be such a coward. I just feel that you should go and have a look. It let out a long yawn. The weak sunlight that squeezed through the forest shone on its sacred and beautiful face. There was a faint golden light, and the space in front of the lake was suffused with a sense of holiness. There was also deep fatigue on its face. It probably did not sleep well these days because it took care of him. We could not help but shake his head. His body was wet just now, but now when he stood up, the traces of water on his body had all disappeared. Well, then I'll go and have a look. He walked out for a few steps, but there was no response. He could not help but turn around and saw that the little angel was lying on the grass, using its arm as a pillow and its wing covering its body. It had fallen asleep. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. Shaking his head, he walked forward and pushed open the door of the building that did not fit in. There was a faint holy light in the building. It was so holy that it could make one's mind relax. Then there was an ominous aura hovering here. The weak, black fog could not compete with the holy aura here. Elements of nirvana. He was slightly surprised when he saw the black aura hovering in the air. He waved his hand and walked forward, waving away the elements of nirvana that were unconsciously released. He walked quickly to Yin Nuoxing's bed and could not help but frown. Yin Nuoxing looked fine. She was lying on the bed peacefully. She was so peaceful that there was no breath to speak of, just like a person who had passed away. Well, it was indeed quite shocking to see his old friend lying on the bed as if she had died the moment he came back. However, when he thought of the fact that the little angel did not have any sadness or other emotions, that was probably not the case. As he thought about it, he reached out his hand and touched Yin Nuoxing's forehead. After a quick check, he relaxed. There was indeed no problem. She was still there, just that element of nirvana. We could not help but frown. Yin Nuoxing's mental strength was operating quite normally, just that it was a little quiet. Even when his power surged into it, it did not produce any reaction. The condition of his body was also normal. It was much better than the half-dead look he had when he last checked. However, the other side was a little strange. He did not know what had happened, but his elements of nirvana were a little active. Even when he was in a deep sleep, they were abnormally active and flowed around his body without any hindrance. Hui frowned and turned to sit on the bed. Just as he was about to check carefully, he discovered something. He made a soft sound of surprise and reached out to pick up Yin Nuoxing's right hand. There was a faintly discernible golden red mark on the back of her hand. If one looked at it directly, they could only see a fair palm. However, if one looked through the thin elements of nirvana, they could vaguely see a golden red mark. Hui frowned and carefully reached out to gently tap on the mark. There was a strange touch between his fingers. It was like an electric shock or a burning sensation that produced a weak pain. Hui held back his doubts and rolled up the sleeves of Yin Nuoxing's pajamas. The golden red mark left behind a neat feather-like mark that spread loosely toward her shoulders and all the way to her back. Why did the old fellow bring back all these weird things when he went out for a trip? Hui let out a long sigh. Her back did not look good now, so he did not bother her. It was better to wait until she woke up. However, this mark, it looked very familiar. He seemed to have seen it somewhere before. Other than that, the other parts are fine. It's just that the elements of nirvana. Hui bit his thumb and pondered. Not only that, the elements of nirvana were overly active. They wandered all over Yin Nuoxing's body and left behind many black, cloud-like marks. They were constantly left and constantly changing, as if they were changing her body. Hui glanced at the golden red mark again. He stood up with a shout and stood in front of the bookshelf at the side. His gaze was constantly flipping through the books as he muttered, "No, I'm still very concerned about this. If I remember correctly, I remember that I saw this mark in some of the past memories that were extracted from the bottom level of the concept layer of the laws in the realm of the gods." He muttered and kept flipping through the books. After a few minutes, just when he thought that the book recorded had been destroyed by the energy impact and could not be rescued, his gaze stopped on a brownish-yellow book. He was slightly delighted. After reaching out to take the book, he flipped through the pages according to the position in his memory. The sound of pages being flipped reverberated in the quiet room. In just 1 or 2 minutes, he found the information he was looking for. Then he was stunned. Wah! Hui screamed in horror. He threw the book on the bed and scrambled out of the building. He found the little angel lying on the ground and hurriedly shouted at her. What happened to that mark on Feng's body? Ah, Mark, what mark? She was slightly stunned. She was still in a state of confusion after being woken up. After a while, she responded, Hasn't that mark been removed? How do you know that he has a mark on his body? Don't worry about it. That mark, did that old guy touch something and leave it on him? The little angel was slightly stunned when she saw how nervous he was. She thought that the god's blood could be considered as something. Then, she nodded and said, I guess so. Is it blood? Did he touch it in the void rift? Huey's face turned pale in an instant. Don't shout so loudly. You're so shocked. She was startled. She nodded and said, He touched it in the illusion. Why didn't he tell you? Hui shook his head stiffly. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. He smiled bitterly and sat down, a little depressed. It's over. I know why the old guy has nightmares. I think he'll have nightmares for a while. Before she could ask why, he smiled bitterly and said, The god's blood of the god of origin. God's blood. In the mythological era, it was some kind of ritual. I don't know. Anyway, that's what the records say. Chapter 1265. Records were troublesome things that existed in records. Once the beginning of something was said in such a manner, it would most likely not end well. In other words, that idiot had gotten himself into trouble again because of his own actions. What does that so-called ritual mean? He looked puzzled, the wings on his back almost curling into knots because of his state of mind. Ritual, it's a ritual. I can't really say it. Let me repeat it. Hui smiled bitterly and scratched his head. After a moment of silence, he said, That's the information extracted from the bottom level of the concept layer of the divine realm. According to Maple, it's something that only I can see and decipher. The primordial divine blood. A drop of the primordial god's blood. If it's left to wander outside without being collected in time, it's enough to condense a world or even a higher being. However, it's not necessarily a good thing. If the primordial god's mind is disturbed by something at that time, its divinity and power will change according to its state of mind. If we are the primordial god, when I'm angry, the power of divinity and our existence will affect everything that comes in contact with it. Because it's an extreme source of energy disturbance, and the divinity and power in the primordial divine blood are almost 100%. The world and the individual formed by the blood will be affected because of it. This is a record left by a certain primordial god who had met the primordial god. Because it's a primordial god of the divine realm, the information it recorded was naturally recorded by the divine realm. In the end, I extracted it. The original words were actually not like that. It's a little vague. I filled in some parts according to the information before and after, and that's roughly what it means. After listening, the little angel tilted his head in surprise. Then, he could not help but ask, Then what does this have to do with that ritual? That's the main point. Huey's expression was solemn as he took a deep breath. The primordial god of Origin's divine blood has various characteristics. They would pay a lot of attention to it. In order to not let themselves disturb the operation of this world, they would rarely leave their power anywhere. But that's not completely the case. The primordial god mentioned that in the previous era, the primordial realm had something. Every once in a while, the primordial god of origin would go on an expedition to the depths of the void. Sometimes there would be a battle, and sometimes there would be no battle. Those who were lucky enough to witness this process would see the primordial gods of origin repairing something in the depths of the void. That's just an aside. The point is that the occasional battle would cause even the primordial gods to be slightly injured. That's probably what it means. Forget it, just take it as it is. After that, the divine blood that could not be recovered in time would be scattered in the void, or fall into an existing world, or remain in the void, evolving into a world or a special individual. As he listened, the little angel became distracted. He knew that the end of the mythological era was destroyed by a void turbulence. The specific reason was that the primordial gods had all fallen, and the god of destruction had no choice but to destroy himself with his enemies. Could those enemies have something to do with the expedition mentioned here? He shook his head and did not say anything immediately. He continued to listen to Huey's brief explanation. It's a little scary for a mortal to come into contact with the divine blood. Wait, let me see. As he spoke, he forgot his lines. He quickly took out the brownish-yellow book and flipped through it. He tilted his head in confusion. Ahem. The mortals who come into contact with the divine blood. Actually, this word does not mean mortals in our understanding. It probably refers to all other life forms other than the primordial gods. When they come into contact with the divine blood, their souls will be dragged into a wonderful space by the enormous and irresistible divinity and divine power. From the perspective of others, it will be like a dream. The rest of the words were gone. Not a single word was left. Then, at the end, the word ritual was mentioned. It probably refers to the dream, but we don't know what happened in the dream. We flipped through the book and barely managed to finish the sentence. Anyway, when he finished, he was confused. He stammered for a long time. And then? It sounds like, at this point, there is nothing unusual happening. Huey's face was serious and dignified. There are records of people who have entered the dream, but he pushed the book in front of the little angel and pointed to a pile of blank space in the middle of a large paragraph. He said, but there is no record. This blank space means that there is no record. If there is a record, but it is very vague and unidentifiable, it will not be read as if there is no record. It's like the writer did not confirm this part of the content and planned to write a chapter first. There are records of people who have entered the dream ritual, but there is no record of it. Could it be that something happened? He finally thought of something that did not fit. Hui shuddered. He drew his thumb across his neck and said, maybe it's all. The little angel was sweating. Don't say such terrible things. Maybe the primordial god did not wait for the person who entered the dream to wake up and tell him anything. After saying this, he regretted. Was there a big difference between this and death? Even if it's not, it won't be too big of a difference. The blood left by the primordial god. Under what circumstances would they be injured and bleed? How good do you think their mind and state of mind would be at that time? Huey's face was gloomy. The little angel took a deep breath and felt dizzy. He squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying. That idiot will be fine. He's all. Hui gritted his teeth and shook his head. He did not know these things. Even if he knew such and such information, it had been more than 10 years. Even if there was any record of a solution, it would not work because of the different rules of the void. Moreover, there was no mention of any solution at all. Space. It was a monotonous space that could be considered complete. It had stable order and stable laws, but it was very monotonous. The land was an orange-red. No, it was not land, but a pot of orange-red soup. A boiling sea reflected the sky and other places into this only color, but it was not completely the same. The color that flowed out from the orange-red sea spread towards the sky, faintly fading and gradually changing, until it spread to the sky and became a faint bright yellow. If it was the sky, perhaps it could be called that. However, he felt that this was just a space in an image. Reality and illusion became blurred here. The ocean was just an ocean right now. It was more like a pool of orange-red stagnant water that could not flow. It was just that its surface area was huge, and it was a little like a diluted blood pool. Yin Nuashing fell from the sky, and his feet slowly landed on the sea. A circle of ripples formed with the contact of his feet, quickly spreading to the surroundings and disappearing at the end of his sight. Has it become a solid ground this time? Yin Nuashing heaved a sigh of relief. It looked like an ocean or stagnant water, but now it was a solid piece of land. He could step on it and run on it. He could even see the circles of ripples formed when his feet landed on it. This was a piece of land that changed every once in a while. At first, it was an ocean. He even jumped into it and swam for a while. Later, it was a cloud of mist. Now it was a piece of land. He did not know what would happen next, and what would become of it. It's a little boring. Yin Nuashing sighed and lay back lazily. He lay on the ground with his arms and legs spread out. He looked up at the bright yellow sky in boredom and was lost in thought for a while. He did not remember what had happened. When he came back to his senses, he appeared in this space. He still remembered that he was lying in that incongruous building before he fell asleep. When he woke up, he was already here. Speaking of waking up, he could not fall asleep in this space. When he was in a shallow sleep, he would have an out-of-body experience. He could see where he was lying or floating in the sky. It had been 8 hours. God knew what had happened this time. God knew how he came to this space. Perhaps he was really too bored. This space sensed his state of mind and decided to find something for him to do before he was about to roll around on the ground out of boredom. Suddenly, something slowly emerged from the orange-red land. The entire land was as clear as a mirror. He could see what was below. Some black arms that were no different from human arms slowly floated up without any movement. Their claws slowly turned and aimed at his limbs. They were about to grab him. There were more than a dozen black arms. They seemed to want to grab him in the next second and then drag him into the water. Boom! The ghost claw that was 10 feet long was connected to a giant palm that was 1,000 feet long. Then it was 10,000 feet long, and then 10,000 feet long. Layers of giant palms with sharp claws reached out and wrapped Yin Nuashing in the center. They suddenly closed together with a force that could crush stars. Yin Nuashing was silent, as if he had fallen asleep. He did not move at all. The giant ghost claw covered his body and closed together. It dragged him into the orange-red land and gradually sank. Just as the giant ghost claw was about to completely sink into the ground, an ominous black aura spread out from the cracks of the ghost claw. The energy that the giant palms could not withstand exploded and destroyed the layers of restraints. The violent elements of nirvana burst out from within. Yin Nuashing's figure emerged from the remains of the ghost claw in broken pieces. He looked down at the orange-red land and let out a sinister laugh. There's nothing. It wasn't easy for there to be some movement, but there's nothing. To think that I even pretended that nothing was happening and was dragged down. Yin Nuashing leaped up agilely and flipped over from the ground. As soon as he steadied himself, the ground started to shake. A giant hill rose from the ground and wriggled like a mountain range. It kept rising in his line of sight and condensed into a black giant that was 10,000 feet tall in just a few seconds. The 12 slits on the ghost face that flickered with golden light stared at him like eyes. Countless black ghost claws were waving around its body and behind it. Yin Nuashing was slightly taken aback when he saw the giant suddenly appear in front of him. He was not frightened. He had fought with those strange things many times. It was not bad to treat it as a manifestation of the abyss death mist. However, this time, the giant's body was not surging with the weak power of divine destruction. Boom! The giant palms rushed in front of him at an unreasonable speed. Many people would feel a sense of oppression due to its huge size, and Yin Nuashing also felt a sense of oppression. However, the reason he felt that oppression was because of the destructive power that was surging in the huge energy coming at him. It made his entire body turn cold. His momentary daze allowed the giant palms to descend from the sky and smash him into the orange-red ground. Giant arms stretched out from all directions and crushed him in the middle like they were crushing a bug. A layer of red energy light surged around the edges of the giant's black body. He was no longer unfamiliar with that power and the color of that energy. An extremely dark energy burst forth from the palms that wrapped him like a cocoon. The elements of nirvana surged out like a volcanic eruption and tore apart the dozens of arms that contained the destructive power. Yin Nuashing's body soared into the sky like a cocoon. His eyes glowed with a solid black light. The elements of nirvana formed a pair of azure wings that flapped behind him. He waved his palms forward, and thousands of formations spread out from the two giant black formations spread out from his azure wings. The centers of the formations were all aimed at the giant, and suddenly they shone brightly. Energy poured out like a torrential storm and pierced through the giant's body like spears of light. It was as if the giant was nailed to the ground. Yin Nuoxing raised his hand and was about to deliver the final blow when an even more violent aura of destruction suddenly surged out from behind him. A huge shadow enveloped his tiny body, and the appearance of that violent energy caused his movements to freeze for a moment. A moment later, he reflexively pulled out the Netherworld Ruin Sword. The elements of nirvana enveloped the Netherworld Ruin Sword, and the energy condensed into a giant sword that extended to hundreds of thousands of feet long. He turned around and swept his sword across. All he saw was a giant that was hundreds of thousands of feet tall and countless ghostly claws that had been sliced in half. The giant fell to the ground like a deflated balloon, but it instantly started to recover after being destroyed. Yin Nuoxing's expression changed again and again. A black aura, the power of nirvana. Yin Nuoxing still had time to think for a while. His heart trembled slightly. He suddenly felt that this couldn't be a replica of the battle that the heavenly destruction god had encountered, right? Chapter 1266. The black aura, coupled with the power of destruction, gave Yin Nuoxing a bad feeling. He remembered what he had seen in that illusion. It was mainly because he had been infected with the power of destruction. It was the power of destruction that belonged to the heavenly god of destruction. He could not be mistaken. It was also because of this that he had turned his attention to that battle. Furthermore, these ghost-faced giants were formed by the black aura. No matter how he looked at it, it seemed like a modified version of that battle that he had not seen that day. The two opposing forces had somehow merged into one and were now trying to pin him to the ground and beat him up. From the looks of it, this was already halfway done. They had successfully pinned him to the ground. Boom! A flurry of swords slashed apart the black arms that bound him to the ground. Yin Nuoxing struggled to turn around, narrowly dodging a large black saber that fell from the sky. He watched as the orange ground was split in half and felt his back teeth itch. It was truly difficult for two fists to fight against four hands. Furthermore, it was not just four hands that he was facing this time. It was four giants with thousands of black arms blocking his path. He had just steadied himself when an arm as large as a mountain came crashing down on him. Yin Nuoxing's body dissipated into a cloud of light particles and disappeared into the black fog, avoiding this attack from a distance. When his body reformed in the distance, he was stunned for a moment. This was a subconscious action. He had used the element of light. Logically speaking, Yin Nuoxing did not have the element of light. Was he actually Yin Nuoxing at this moment? Black spikes protruded from the ground and surrounded him like a storm, sealing off the surrounding space. Yin Nuoxing barely dodged a dozen or so attacks before he could only raise his sword to meet them. He swung the Netherworld Ruins sword in front of him with both hands. When the spikes suddenly exploded in front of him and turned into a net of thorns, he was stunned for a moment and hurriedly changed his sword style. It had been a long time since he had fought head-on with a weapon, so his attacks were somewhat rusty. The giant sword swept through the space, but before he could even catch his breath, more strange things came crashing down on him. Not only were there arms, there were also the heads of some giant beasts, long weapons, and spears. The four giants had also approached him at this time. Hundreds of pairs of hands, together with a black mountain, came crashing down like Mount Tai. The black mass and the pressure that came crashing down on him was like a nightmare that he would never wake up from. Disperse! Yin Nuoxing roared. His pair of black azure wings, which swayed with the wind, collapsed into a black cloud that surrounded him. A huge shockwave suddenly exploded with him as the center, bringing with it the element of nirvana. The huge shockwave exploded into space, as if a huge fireball had exploded. The element of nirvana bared its ferocious fangs in all directions and rushed in all directions with the shockwave. The violent energy impact destroyed the nearby black objects and scattered the element of nirvana on the limbs that had not completely faded away. Yin Nuoxing's expression froze slightly. A faint black light flowed out from his body. He was about to use his divine power to activate the element of nirvana when the energy that had always been successful seemed to have suddenly frozen and sank into the broken limbs. He lost his senses. He lost the sense of the separated aura, and he felt terrible. It was the first time he had encountered something that could directly ignore his element of nirvana. Logically speaking, regardless of whether it existed or did not exist, or whether it was real or illusory, it should be affected by the element of nirvana. After casually dodging a few attacks, Yin Nuoxing's body swooped down. The netherworld ruins sword in his hand glowed with a deep purplish-black light. He adjusted the angle slightly and then swung the sword down. In that instant, the giant was split in half. However, he did not stop. He turned around and quickly swung the giant's sword. The energy that he gathered allowed him to continuously condense a longer sword. In the blink of an eye, he had swung the sword nearly 1,000 times. The giant in front of him was cut into hundreds of thousands of pieces, almost turning into a cloud of dust that scattered everywhere. Boom! Bang! The huge black magic circle once again flickered with light. Finally, Yin Nuoxing found a moment to breathe and release the magic circle. The flashing light of energy was accompanied by the deafening sound of energy explosions that reverberated endlessly, causing the orange ground to tremble and ripple wildly. The four colossal giants used their voices to express their anger for the first time. Their angry roars actually weakened the light of energy a little. Come on, let's see if you can live faster, or I can kill faster. Yin Nuoxing gritted his teeth and let out a roar. He waved his hand and directed several gigantic magic circles at the giant that was swirling with tornadoes to collect its body parts. Beams of energy with the power to destroy the void pierced through the tornado, illuminating the tornado. Just as he was about to follow up with another attack, the ground below suddenly shook as if it was melting. It was like a vast sea with great waves. Then a deep crimson vortex appeared, sinking hundreds of meters deep into the ground. The magic circle was still roaring and pouring energy in all directions without caring about the cost. Yin Nuoxing did not have time to care about the collapsing vortex below. He glanced at it a few times and then withdrew his attention. The four giants in front of him were not as easy to deal with as he thought. He did not care about the vortex, and the latter would not care about him either. When a vortex stopped collapsing, a black fountain gushed out from the center like a fountain, blocking Yin Nuoxing and the four giants like a wall. It dispersed the energy that was surging out violently. He was slightly startled and retreated without thinking. 2 or 3 magic circles shrank around him like screens, layer by layer, and continued to condense energy. A low muffled sound reverberated between heaven and earth, causing Yin Nuoxing to nervously hold his breath. The magic circles rotated continuously as he waved his hands, guarding against any possible situation. 2 golden and 2 black magic circles locked onto the vortex. He had made up his mind. No matter what kind of thing would emerge from there later, it would not be wrong to kill it first. After all, nothing better would emerge from this place. That's right, nothing better would emerge from here. He could use a more insane method. As he thought of this, the magic circles that he was controlling with his right hand suddenly stopped rotating. They stood erect on the spot, vigilant of all directions. He raised his right hand, and an almost endless amount of energy surged out from his palm, crazily condensing and crazily compressing. Boom! A giant blood-red hand that was like a pillar that reached the sky reached out from the vortex and pierced through the black fountain. The hand slammed onto the ground, and visible spiderweb-like cracks appeared on the orange-red ground. This was not the end. The giant hand seemed to be climbing and propping itself up, as if a giant was about to climb up from below. Yin Nuoxing's heart skipped a beat. A look of determination flashed across his eyes, and he slammed his hands down fiercely. The energy cluster that was as large as a small sun and thousands of magic circles flashed with destructive light. Just as they were about to explode with destructive power, the scene in front of him suddenly shook. It was as if he had seen countless strange scenes when he was traveling at the speed of light. With a flash, everything disappeared. Even the destructive attack that he had painstakingly unleashed disappeared together with it. The scene, space, or anything else had all disappeared. All that was left in front of him was darkness. What is this? Yin Nuoxing was speechless. He looked around in confusion. When he lowered his head, he could still see his hands and his body. He shook his head and could not help but sigh. He did not know what the other party was doing. Seeing such a change, he naturally thought that there was something behind it. He stood on the spot. He still felt that he was standing on solid ground. He even jumped a few times to make sure that he did not fall into any strange places. Only then did he look around. Darkness was the only color. It was as if he had fallen into the depths of the void, or some other place that was even darker. Nothing existed. There was no breath. There was nothing else. He did not want to see anything else emerging from this godforsaken place. After standing still for a few minutes, Yin Nuoxing casually lifted his foot and took a step in a random direction. There was still no movement in this dark space. He was not afraid. He decided to lift his foot and slowly walk forward. Even if there was no light, he was not afraid. In this godforsaken place, he could not suddenly fall down, could he? It was only then that he remembered to make contact with the outside. He felt that he should be in a certain space. After taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes and found Huey's soul seed in his soul. He gently touched it, but there was no response. There was no soul communication. He sighed dejectedly. It seemed that he had mysteriously lost contact with the heavenly destruction god again. However, this result was within his expectations. Judging from the destructive power, this space should be related to the heavenly destruction god. Thinking about it this way, it was easy to understand. After being mysteriously swept into this space, it was simply impossible for him to contact the outside world. Perhaps the situation was not just that. In this space, some things did not seem to have changed, but some things had changed a lot. He still possessed the power of the peak of origin. At the same time, he also possessed the 12 elements that he should not have. Coincidentally, it was those 12 elements. His divine power had also merged with the power of the stars. It was as if 3 of him had merged into one. I've encountered many dark scenes, so I can't just walk around aimlessly. As long as I fulfill some conditions, I should be able to sneak out of this space, Yin Nuoxing muttered to himself. These trapping spaces were either boring trials or traps used to trap people and stall for time. Between the two, he felt that it should be the former. I just don't know what wants to do this time. It suddenly pulled me in without even informing me. After walking for a while, Yin Nuoxing suddenly sat down and looked at his own condition. Other than what Google said, there were no other abnormalities. His mental state was good, he was not disturbed, and his soul was normal. No, this situation, and his appearance. The way he walked, he was now a spirit body. He understood a little. It seemed like it was another dream in a dream, but he did not know why the owner of this dream was looking for him. They caught him and played with him for a while before throwing him out. Or it might be an even worse joke. Perhaps it was a trap. Aimlessly, he walked 100,000 steps in boredom. He counted step by step. Because he was too bored, nothing happened for the time being. He was prepared for all kinds of things to happen. The worst thing that could happen was that he would suddenly fall into a trap and be imprisoned forever. He was mentally prepared and had already come up with dozens of ways to break through. Or he could just sink into this darkness forever and nothing would happen. With his eternal life, he was afraid that he would stay here forever. He felt that he was more afraid of the latter. However, it seemed that the person behind this did not intend to let him wander around in boredom. Suddenly, a tiny light appeared in the dark space. It was as bright as a star. It was so small that he could cover it with his fingers. A faint blue light was the only thing that existed in this darkness. Yin Nuoxing subconsciously turned around and walked towards the place where the light appeared. However, as he walked, he realized that the light in front of him was not a thing. It was more like a light that was always hanging in front of him at night to guide the way. When he got close to a certain distance, the blue light suddenly disappeared, leaving him stunned on the spot. Not long after, another light appeared in another direction. It was still blue. When he saw the light, he could not help but raise his eyebrows. He said to himself, "So, where is this person trying to lure me or lead me to this time? Or could it be another trap?" He turned around fearlessly and walked forward. It didn't matter. He didn't have the conditions to care about more things at the moment. With this thought, he quickened his pace and almost broke into a jog. In his heart, the number that had stagnated for a while was slowly rising again. Along the way, the lights flickered. If he was given a north, south, east, and west direction at the place where he first saw the light, he would probably be in the northwest direction now. However, this was useless and had no reference value. Following the bright blue light, who knew if he really turned around halfway or turned back? All his senses could feel was that he kept walking forward. He did not know where he was going. 103, 695, 882 million. Yin Nuashing took a heavy step and gritted his teeth as he reported a number. He did not know how long he had been walking. At this moment, his face was gloomy and unhappy. He felt that he had been played like a monkey. Now, looking at the faint blue light, looking at the swaying light, he felt that it was mocking him. He kept staring and looking, and he felt that it was even more so. In anger, he turned around and walked towards the darkness, ignoring the faint blue light. He turned around and walked toward the darkness. Just as he walked 5 or 6 steps into the darkness, a light suddenly appeared in front of him. Yes, it was a light, a sea of light that was pieced together by golden lights. It was like a light feast where fireflies bloomed in the forest on a summer night. Yin Nuashing was slightly startled. When he turned around, the faint blue light had already disappeared. He looked at the golden sea of light with a face full of suspicion. He kept feeling that he had jumped into a trap, and that he had taken the initiative to jump into it. Forget it. If it's a trap, then so be it. He sighed a little dejectedly. Anyway, he was already tired of walking 100 million steps. It was not a bad thing to have a trap to relieve his tiredness. He would just see how the other party wanted to play with him. With that thought in mind, he stepped into the sea of light and reached out to grab a golden light spot. Then, he casually threw it away. He was like a child who did not think about anything and played in the sea of light innocently. Just as he felt that something was about to happen, a little light gradually appeared in the darkness in front of him. It was a bright, soft yellow color. It was quite dim, but after getting used to the darkness for a long time, when he saw a light that was brighter than the sea of light, he felt a little stinging in his eyes. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath. He blinked a few times and closed his eyes, preparing himself to deal with everything that was about to come to him. Then, when he opened his eyes, he saw 4 human-shaped walls in front of him. He was stunned. The latter seemed to have sensed something as well. He turned around with a rumble and saw 4 ghost faces with 12 golden cracks staring at him in unison. The darkness under his feet faded away and turned into an orange-red land. Only the sea of light did not dissipate. The 4 giants slowly turned around. Yin Nuashing's cheeks twitched. He did not know if it was an illusion, but he seemed to see them smiling. It was a ferocious smile, as if they were saying to him, "Damn it, how dare you come back?" Asterisk boom. Asterisk inexplicably, the battle started again. Yin Nuashing only felt that. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.